here, including those who have been formally invited and those who had interest to also come and observe and participate. Honorable members, you all, it's your meeting. You all welcome. My task will be just to give people to say what they say within the time allocated as per the program. Let me say just a few words why we're here. As part of oversight work, we think that we still need more information about the entity, particularly Eskom at this moment. We'll be trying to have all this form of meeting in all the stakeholders. We feel that it's important on the democracy in relation to the management in an entity that comes here on a daily basis to update and give particular information to us. But also it's important, and also the department, we don't have to rely to those two only, while they are important. But also it's important to listen beyond them to the entire stakeholders, including organized labor. We are living in a very organized society, in a unionized society. Therefore, it's important to listen to the organized labor formation, since they are experiencing these developments at a very close range. But also, we are also interested to hear from the business, the stakeholders, including experts. There are people who have a responsibility to follow each and every kind of process and information, who make research and all that. We have to listen to them and hear their views. We are in a business also of empowering ourselves in the process. When we are in a standing committee, by the end of 5 years, you must be a different person from when you started. Therefore, people like me who never had a closer look at these entities is also part of a learning curve. We're also interested to get solutions, not only complaint and problems experience, but we're also interested to get to what do you think could be a solution to these problems. We also want to hear from these stakeholders. Without taking a lot of time, because we are here as honorable members to listen to you. Of course, at the end, after all this presentation, we will have to punch back, whether we ask questions, clarities, or reject some of the information. We do have also that right of saying, no, what we are talking, as far as we understand, unfortunately, it's not going to help us, Therefore, we have also that right. Therefore, when we say, no, sir, we don't agree with you, don't take it personal. It's informed by what we represent, because at the end of the day, while we are doing we're not just a non-interested kind of a party here. We do have interest also in terms of the direction these entities has to go through. We have different views, of course. We are not like one organization. We're from all corners. But what unites us as this committee, as a portfolio committee, is that we want to turn things around and improve the situation. We all have. We can differ on how do we do it, but we have an interest to actually resolve the problems that are there. Therefore, without wasting, as per the program, there are apologies, of course. Let me quickly go through those apologies. By the way, we did invite Labour Federation. I can see they are here. We also invited business. We invited also professional associations and NGOs. I've seen some are here. Of course, there are apologies that we receive, formal apologies from PUSA Business Unity South Africa. They have sent a formal apology saying they are involved to some kind of engagement at network level with the labor, and they feel that there is no way that they could miss there. And also SAFTU cited a similar reason, claiming that if there will be any other opportunity, they would like to come. It's just that not conducive for them to be here. Those are the two formal apologies we have received. Chair, Secretary, is there any from the members' side that you have at your disposal?
It's Mr. Swart and Ms. Peary who submitted the apology.
Swart was here. He is claimed to be, he's going to be in and out due to other obligation. Thank you. Can we, Honorable?
Chair, Honorable Khachalia is still absent.
No, we understand. Thanks. Honorable members, we have to go to the presentations. We know that this presentation might be thick. I saw one of Cosatu, but we will be appealing to the presenters to try to stick to the time that is allocated as per the program. We know the information is thick, but yeah. Also introduce yourself, yeah, and everything.
Okay. Good morning, Chair, and good morning to honourable members and to colleagues. Thanks for giving Cosatu some space to present our proposals and our views around Eskom. My name is Matthew Parks from Cosatu, and I think, Chair, we're looking forward to a positive discussion. And as you say, Comrade Chair, that nothing is cast in stone. We want to hear and to enrich each other's views and come with concrete proposals. So we're not really focusing so much about the problems at Eskom. I think we all know about them. We've been discussing it for many years as a nation. Our purpose, Comrade Chair, is basically how can we save Eskom, how can we save the economy, the state, workers' jobs, workers' pensions. Chair, look, I think for us as Cosatu, Eskom is not just any company. It's not a question of it being a Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise or some factory. It is the most important company in the country. All of our economy depends upon it. Everything we do in life depends upon it. And whether we like it or we don't like it, Eskom generates 95% of our electricity. It transmits and distributes 100%. And for instance, Cosatu, who has members at Eskom, it's not just a question of the 44,000 workers whose jobs depend upon Eskom and their pensions. It's in fact all 16 million South African workers. And also, Comrade Chair, it's also about all our pension funds. Chair, we're in a very difficult situation. You know, our economy is very fragile. We're bleeding. So one issue, for example, is that with the current round of load shedding, we're losing about 2 billion rand every day in the economy. Manufacturing is bleeding, mining is bleeding, and if we don't resolve the Eskom crisis, this recession we've entered now yesterday will move into a depression. Chair, I think also what has also informed us is the precarious state of Eskom. You've seen how rapidly things have deteriorated at SAA in December, January, even now. We don't want that to happen to Eskom, and it can happen to Eskom given the many crises it's failing. Chair, we were as Cosatu, we developed our proposals in November last year. We were quite alarmed when the Minister of Finance presented the medium-term budget statement to Parliament, and we really felt honestly that there is no plan on the table to save Eskom. The crises there are so huge that government alone can't save it. Eskom management alone can't save it. It really involves and requires all of us, whether as government, as labor, as business, as community, to contribute towards a solution, to compromise and even to sacrifice as needs be. Chair, I think also we feel there is simply no more time to discuss, to debate issues. Things are very bad. Chair, we were informed and sensitive to the issue of Moody's. We may hate Moody's, it's fine. We may call them white monopoly, capital, imperialism, it's fine. But the reality is if you want to borrow, you want to be invested in the stock market, you want to borrow money as government. If you want to attract investment, you have to accept the rules. You may not like the rules, but the rules are there. And we also felt that if we don't have a credible, coherent plan on the table to save Eskom, we will be downgraded. That might still happen. And it's going to make our efforts to rebuild the economy, the state, to protect workers' jobs, much more complicated. So, Chair, we have presented our proposal as Cosatu, and it wasn't just on Eskom. In fact, it was on all SOEs, the economy, the state, tax reform, the wage bill in the state, etc. To the Alliance leadership last year, the ANC, we've been engaging with the President, with the government, with different ministers. We've had very good engagements at NEDLAC with our other social partners from business, from other labor federations, from community. And we think that actually that we've been quite pleasantly surprised. Business has actually made significant, we found each other on many issues. So I think we've also really felt that one of our key proposals, Comrade Chair, besides let's having the debate open, let's start enriching ourselves, but having the social compact for us, which is so important. And we've really found that quite surprising, business has said, no, they're on board with the social compact, we need to all compromise and contribute. I think, Chair, also look at this is a very sensitive issue for workers. It's about workers' pension, investment, and so on. We've been engaging with FUDUSA, our sister trade union federations. We've had good engagement with them. We think we will find each other. We've had that. Comrade Chair, I'm a bit sensitive around your time pressures. So let me try to be as quick as possible. Though it is a very critical issue, the most critical issue facing us. So look, one of the issues we felt, Chair, is that the debt level at Eskom is unaffordable, it's unmanageable. Eskom has told us that out of the 454 billion rand debt, they can manage about 200 billion rand. But the fact is they're borrowing each month to survive, and that's unsustainable. Also, Chair, the issue of tariffs is bleeding consumers, it's threatening the collapse of the mining and manufacturing industries, it's impeding our ability to export electricity to neighboring states. And of course, the Eskom debt levels, if they continue to rise, it threatens the very sovereignty of our state. I think I've gone through this thing, Chair. So, Chair, look, we basically see three options on the table. The one is what we're doing right now, where we pray, we hope things will come right. On that one, Chair, we think we'll see the collapse of Eskom in the near future, and that'll be the collapse of the economy. Comrade Chair, you might remember that when our previous Minister of Finance was fired about 4 years ago, late one night, we lost 500 billion rand on the stock market in that week. That was workers' pension money. You can imagine if Eskom can collapse, what would be the damage to our pension investments? And they are 90% are on the JSE. The other option, Comrade Chair, is that we go the IMF route. And look, the IMF will devastate us. They will impose such brutal austerity measures about slashing workers' wages by 25%, slashing pensions by 25%, privatizing everything. They will collapse the state's capacity. And that's not being alarmist, that's just pointing out what happened to Greece, to Ireland, etc. If they can do that to EU states, then who are we at the bottom of the continent? And that would lead to a depression. Chair, the only option we see is about a social compact where business, labor, community, and government, we come together, we all compromise, and we come up with solutions to save Eskom. So the one part of our proposals, Chair, is not the only part. Unfortunately, in the media, it's been the kind of the general fixation, which has not really helped matters, is that we need to have a special finance vehicle to intervene with Eskom. So we're not going to give Eskom money. They need to reform and restructure themselves and get off the bad behavior. But we look at removing 254 billion rand from the Eskom debt book, and that requires the mobilization of both public and private financing. So it's not a question of taking workers' pension funds. It's about going to the PIC and looking at the excess interest that they have available and investing that in government bonds, which are guaranteed, which have return on investments to the lenders. You remember the PIC already has invested 104 billion rand in Eskom through government guaranteed bonds, and those have been paid. They've been healthy return on investments, etc. But equally, Chair, it can't just be the public servants who contribute. Governments contribute through the Development Bank, the IDC, the CETAs, etc. Equally, the private sector has to contribute. We must all share the pain, share the risk and the exposure, and all contribute. And we've had very positive engagements, not just from the private sector, but even from investment funds in the private sector who are saying they're willing to contribute, and it's provided for within the law as long as it respects financial integrity, fiduciary duty, investment mandates, etc. So, Chair, specifically with regard to the PIC, we're looking at government-guaranteed bonds, so there's a return on investment, and this can be more affordable to Eskom than normal private sector lending. And it's been done before, and it's fully within the law. We're also looking at having the PIC becoming an equity partner in Eskom. The PIC is a state-owned entity. If it can be an equity partner in Eskom, it gives it a seat on the Eskom board at the table. It can then enforce Eskom to restructure, to clean up its act, to deal with the corruption, the wasteful expenditure, etc. Because if you just have bonds, you don't have a stick within which to beat Eskom into behaving. Comment Chair, we're also looking at you release the financial assistance in trenches. So as Eskom implements different parts of the turnaround plan, we'll release more financial assistance. So there is a carrot and a stick approach. You don't just simply hand over money and say, good luck, let's hope you behave. And of course, Chair, we think we need to look at a review of the Eskom debt structure to see the ways to make it more affordable from the time payments, the debt levels, etc. And the lenders must also contribute. So, Chair, we've got three basically non-negotiable conditions as Labour. One is that no worker be retrenched, and we'll come back to that. Eskom remain a publicly owned utility, and there must be a clear turnaround plan for Eskom, because we can't have the discussion every year. Eskom must finally get off its drug habits and reform. Chair, critical for us in the era of state capture is the issue of corruption. We do appreciate the 2 rounds of arrest at Eskom, but we think it must go much further. And to state the obvious, Chair, that those who have stolen it at Eskom must go to jail. The assets must be attached. We know who they are. We've had 4 commissions. Government must act upon it. Equally, Chair, the management which has broken Eskom must be held accountable, dismissed if needs be, and the assets attached according to the Auditing Amendment Act. There must be a forensic audit of all of Eskom's contracts and expenditures so we know exactly what are the holes, how to fill them. You can't invest and then they continue to eat. And of course, Chair, those supply chain officials, management who have their hands in the cookie jar must face the might of the law. It doesn't matter what color the T-shirts are. Chair, we'd want to see worker representatives appointed to Eskom's board. Equally, Chair, so one political party has kicked us. Why do you want to invest workers' pensions in the in the Eskom investments? We would agree that you can't just be workers' pensions invested. We want to see the politicians, members of parliament's pension fund also come into the party, must contribute. And all of this must be done in a sustainable manner. Equally, the Eskom pension fund must also be part of it. There must be a dedicated unit to deal with illegal connections. There must also be serious interventions around the coal quality supply, insurance, and inspections. So you can't have private sector companies smuggling in stones as part of the coal contracts. And this is a huge thing because there's about 2,000 trucks a day delivering coal. But this is worth billions of rands, it must be done. Chair, we've asked the private sector to come to the party. So the coal suppliers who are overpricing Eskom, the IPP generation contracts which are overpriced, and the maintenance contracts which are overpriced must be made affordable to Eskom, must be market related. You can't collapse Eskom. Business can cry about the sanctity of contracts, that's fine, but there will be no Eskom in a year's time if you don't adjust the bleeding. And we're actually quite pleased our businesses saying they're willing to engage around it. It might mean, for example, Chair, around IPP contracts, you might have to extend them, say, from 20 years to 30 years so they can recover the investment expenditure, but they must be affordable to Eskom. Chair, around the revenue issue, we think we need to move as a nation towards prepaid, all of us, not just some consumers, all consumers, but equally, Chair, government, business, industry must move to prepaid. We need to start moving towards a single payment account for Eskom, so Eskom can receive its money every single day, and stop this behavior of some municipalities or parastatals, or even businesses who pay when they feel like it, 3 months later. It would mean, Comrade Chair, that we might need to review the municipal funding model, because a lot of municipalities depend upon Eskom for the revenue. Chair, there must be a comprehensive debt recovery plan. You can't have a situation where municipalities and parastatals owe Eskom about 37 billion rand. But the losses of Eskom last year was 20 billion rand, and again this year they're going to lose about 20 billion rand. Treasury must also wield the stick. Those municipalities and parastatals which owe Eskom money, Treasury must deduct that from their allocations, but you can do it in a phased approach, not a big bang, so you don't collapse municipalities. It can be done over 6 months or whatever, but it must be paid. Equally, Comrade Chair, we know we have very illustrious members of parliament here. There must be a Masakane campaign, so all communities must pay, and that means tackling the issue of the Soweto debt levels of 17 billion rand. It can't be that constituencies like Khayelitsha or Kuruman are paying, but we're afraid because of political fear to deal with the issue of Soweto. The issue might be complex, so you need to find a complex resolution, but everybody must pay, especially government. Chair, I think we were quite pleased by the initial steps of the new CEO of Eskom Director around having a maintenance plan which is less disruptive to industry, to consumers. We think that if we can also release the financial pressures on Eskom around the debt payments, they can invest more in maintenance and help reduce the load shedding and help reduce the cost to the economy. Around tariffs, Comrade Chair, there needs to be a much clearer hands-on approach to tariffs. You can't be outpricing the economy. The mining industry is collapsing because the tariffs are unaffordable. Consumers are collapsing. And you know the trajectory is very clear. The mining industry is now going to go off-grid, and you cannot blame them because they have jobs, their livelihood is at stake. Shopping centers are going off-grid. And you know that households will also go off-grid. So the tariffs must become affordable, so they become supportive to economic growth. But again, we can start exporting electricity to SADC states once again. If you don't capture this window period, we'll find neighboring states will move off-grid as well, like Botswana is doing. But of course, Chair, to assist with indigent households, we need to make sure all municipalities have indigent household policies, that they implement them, that those who qualify are registered. And Comrade Chair, the ANC election manifesto, which committed to increasing the free electricity allocation to indigent households, must be implemented. Comrade Chair, on the issue of generation, we'd want to see the Minister expanding Eskom's mandate to allow it to enter the renewable energy space completely, not just have the one wind farm in Darling. We need to begin investing in renewable energy battery storage capacity because that is the future of energy. We need to look at ways to extend the lifespan or to create alternative economic opportunities for those power stations which are coming to the end of the lifespan. And they're coming to the end of the lifespan very, very soon. Hendrina, etc., in the next couple of years. And the entire communities and workers, families who depend upon those economic activities. And of course, Comrade Chair, we need to look at investing in clean coal, especially that we generate 70% of our electricity from coal currently. So those commitments around Madupi and Kusile, around clean coal, around harnessing, must be implemented. So, Comrade Chair, look, often people have said, look, the wage bill at Eskom is too high. So we said, look, our principle is that no workers should be added to the unemployment queue, especially when you have 40% unemployment levels and thousands being retrenched every month. We've said that the management structure at Eskom is bloated, it must be reduced. It jumped from 80 to about 800. Most of those managers make more than 2 million rand a year, and those are the guys who are broke in Eskom. You must reduce the perks, the structure, etc. Around the staff at Eskom, we're saying, let's do a head count and a skills audit so we know what exactly is the situation. And if then the chair, there is a surplus of staff in generation, but there's a shortage in transmission or distribution, we can redeploy staff. If there's still a surplus of staff, we can look at deploying staff to municipal electricity departments where there is a shortage of skills, or even other SOEs, the state, etc. But as long as we don't add people to the unemployment queue. Chair, one of our understanding of why the Eskom headcount jumped from that 32,000 to about 47,000, now about 44,000, was because maintenance contracts were insourced. Yet you're still finding maintenance work being outsourced. So that issue of corruption, double dipping must be dealt with. We are pleased that businesses say they're willing to contribute towards reskilling Eskom workers. But of course, Commissioner, all these things must be engaged with labor at the Eskom collective bargaining unit, where NUMSA, NUM, Solidarity, etc. are there. Commissioner, we've had very good engagement with business around prescribed assets, where we've agreed to call it impact investments, where we look at public and private financing support for essential public economic goods. So this would include Eskom, but it also would include other essential economic goods, like investing in railways, in the ports, in NSFAS funding, etc. But it must be done in a way which respects investment mandates, the pension fund mandates, the financial integrity, and so on. Commissioner, I think we'd also want to see, and it's a call of public servants, that the PIC must also assist public servants on their own needs, like around housing, etc., so they feel they are benefiting from their money. It's not simply sitting on the stock market and benefiting the private sector. I'm just coming towards the end, Comrade Chair. Look, our proposal is not just immediate and short-term interventions or medium-term interventions, it's also longer-term. We know there are huge structural changes in the economy, especially in the coal sector. We don't want to see those 70,000 jobs in the coal sector or those workers thrown into the unemployment queue. We want to see a just transition plan not just being talked about in nice English words, but being fleshed out and being implemented. It must target the coal belt, especially in Mpumalanga, Limpopo, the Eastern Cape, where the mining sector is dominant. The Presidential Climate Change Coordinating Council must be brought up, and they must really begin to flesh out what does a just transition look like. And in Comrade Chair, we think there are huge and exciting opportunities there. So, right now, solar panels that come in here, they're from China. We've lost many of the solar panel factories that we had in the Western Cape, the KZN, etc. We need to require that the solar panels be made locally. You can create hundreds of thousands of jobs. We've also asked that all buildings in the country, and there's about 7.5 million buildings, be required within the next 5 years to have solar panels installed, but that they must be locally made. So it can help reduce the pressure on Eskom, our climate change objectives, but you can create a whole new industry. And once you have that industry, we can then export to neighboring states. Comrade Chair, even the issue of electricity meter boxes, again, mostly made in China, let them be made locally. It's huge economic opportunities. The longer-term plan, Chair, to create a stable mass demand base for Eskom, because you can see demand is plummeting, is around converting our auto manufacturing sector to electric vehicles. We have about 12.5 million cars in the country. You know the trend for the cars is to go to electric vehicles. China is producing about 1 million cars a year. Renault, Volvo, VW are all moving towards electric vehicles. If we don't move very quickly in the next 5 or so years to converting our industry to electric vehicles, we will lose the auto manufacturing industry, which will have devastating consequences for the Eastern Cape, KZN, Gauteng. So we need to engage with those manufacturers and look at doing that. And that can be a huge opportunity, Chair, for exporting to the continent, etc. So yeah, in conclusion, Comrade Chair, our proposals are exactly that. They're proposals. We hope that MPs from all parties will help to enrich it. Nothing is cast in stone except the principles obviously are cast in stone, but the modalities of how you do it, how you refinance, how you fix up Eskom, those can be fleshed out, and they will take some time, a lot of technical work to flesh out, etc. But Chair, I think we've had very good engagements at the Presidential Working Committee at NADLEC from all parties. Part of our thing also, Chair, is not to give government a blank check. There can be no blank checks. And we'd want to see from Eskom and from government monthly reports to the Presidential Working Committee on the turnaround plan. We don't want to just intervene and then say, God willing, let's hope you behave. We've seen enough with state capture, with the mismanagement and the collapse of the state, that we cannot trust. We must put pressure on all of us. So that's in a nutshell, Comrade Chair. I hope we've added value to the honourable members' work today. Thank you.
Thank you, Cosatu. Mr. Parks, can we, without engaging, I think we have made notes, and we all have the copies of the presentation. We'll have to move fast to the next presentation. Operational and financial challenges facing Eskom and possible solution by energy expert, Professor Anthony Ebenhard. That is coming. I was called this morning that actually he is not having a formal presentation.
Chair, I can make it available, sir.
You can make it available. Okay. Thanks.
Chair, honourable members, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this stakeholder engagement. Just some background. Some of the members here will know that I chaired the President's Eskom Sustainability Task Team. We did our work mainly in the first 6 months of last year, and our final report went in June last year. And in my day job, I'm a professor at University of Cape Town at the Power Futures Lab. Chair, this table, I think, captures very clearly the way in which the performance of Eskom has deteriorated in the last 10, 12 years. So you can see there's a column there for 2007 and one for last year, 2019. So you can see if we read each row, installed capacity, they've added a little bit of extra capacity. That's mainly as the new Medupi and Kusile units come on. But some of the old coal power plants have started to be decommissioned. So they've actually, in 12 years, added relatively little additional power. The next line you can see is how much electricity they're selling. And you can see today, Eskom is selling less electricity than it sold 12 years ago. But if you look at the third row, its revenue has increased fourfold. So they're not selling more, but their revenue has gone up. Why? Because the tariff has gone up. It's gone up more than fivefold. It used to be 18 cents just 12 years ago. Today it's 106 cents per kilowatt hour on average. The next line you can see on coal, they're actually burning less coal because they're producing less electricity. But the coal cost is sixfold. And if you look at it, it's about a 17% year-on-year increase in coal costs. Employee costs have also gone up very high, 13% year-on-year, in part because of above inflation increases, but mostly because the head count has increased. So there were 32,000 employees in 2007, and they're currently around 46,000. And the last line there, I think, is as Matthew has indicated, is the biggest issue facing Eskom. Its debt has increased more than tenfold. Today it sits above 485 billion rand, and that is completely unsustainable because Eskom is now making a loss, so its costs are higher than its revenues. It reported a 29 billion pre-tax loss in the last financial year, and its debt service cover ratio, in other words, the amount of cash that it has to service its debt, is less than 50%, less than 0.5. So it's generating less than half the amount of cash it needs just to pay the interest and the principal on its debt. So it's in a debt trap, right? It's borrowing to pay its debt. And just in a single year, this current year, they're paying 84 billion rand on debt repayments, principal and interest. And this is clearly unsustainable. The way Eskom is surviving, because it's effectively insolvent, is just through bailouts from National Treasury at the moment. And obviously that, again, is unsustainable. So this is a table from the budget now. And you can see, between 1923, when Eskom was founded, and 2008, Eskom received zero fiscal support, no bailouts. Since 2008 until the present, by 2022, it would have received 244 billion. So this completely dwarfs the support for any of the other SAAs. You can see SAA, which is the second biggest bailout, is just a fraction of what Eskom is receiving. And clearly, we can't go on like this, and this is why I think the Cosatu proposal and initiatives is very welcome. Matthew also talked about the municipal debt. You can see on the left is all municipalities except Soweto, and that's now about just over 20 billion. But the real worry is that line, is you can see the percentage of payments is reducing very, very sharply. So Soweto is another 20 billion. So 20 billion of municipalities, another 20 billion of Soweto. So there's a total of 40 billion now in arrears. And clearly this, again, can't continue if Eskom is to be sustainable. So Eskom clearly understands all of these things. This is a slide from one of their presentations to this committee. Its debt is unsustainable. It's not earning enough revenue. Even though tariffs have gone up high, its costs are too high. It's very, very difficult for Eskom to compress its costs. Biggest cost item is coal. And its performance has deteriorated. So that's EAF, that's the average energy availability factor, continues to decline. And Eskom is in what many of us call a classic utility death spiral. What does that mean? It's not earning enough revenue to cover its costs, so it puts its tariffs up. Every time it puts its tariffs up, people use less electricity. So its overall revenue doesn't really, is reaching a place where it's hard to increase it. So the more revenue it needs, it puts its prices further up, and consumption declines, and the utility dies. Okay, so Chair, you said you were interested in proposals, so I will briefly just go through of these. The Eskom CEO himself has set out a very clear set of priorities, which I think are comprehensive. He has to focus, obviously, on operational issues, getting the lights on. On the income statement, he has to concentrate on ways in getting his revenue up, but while still keeping tariffs affordable, particularly for poor households. He has to deal with municipal debt arrears, and he has to compress costs, mainly in coal. On the balance sheet, the whole issue of debt relief and refinancing, and we'll come to that. He has to deal with corruption, and he's also started the process of Eskom restructuring through what he calls divisionalization. But Eskom's not going to be able to solve this problem by itself, as it will become apparent in a moment. And there are a broader set of reforms in the power sector that are necessary and are starting as well. So the President has announced the issue of separating Eskom into 3 entities, focusing very much on transmission, and we'll come to that in a moment. And then the Energy Minister make it easier for people to produce their own power, fast-track licenses, although we believe, again, that the regulatory reforms could be deeper there, and to make it easier for private investment to come into the sector to help us keep the lights on. So let's talk about the debt relief. Essentially, there are a lot of proposals on the table, but essentially they can be grouped into 3 broad categories. We can carry on the way we're doing, which is just annual fiscal bailouts, but that's clearly unsustainable. The state can take over Eskom's debt, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Or we could talk about the special purpose vehicle, the special financing facility linked to Eskom restructuring. So let's go through those options 2 and 3. We think that although it's the easiest for the state to take over Eskom's debt, it's also a very costly option. It will increase South Africa's debt to GDP ratio by about 6 percentage points, which will definitely lead to credit rating downgrades. There's also a cost to this because some of the debt is unsecured. In other words, some of the debt doesn't have a state guarantee. If you're going to take all the debt onto the sovereign, you have to do it on the same terms, pari passu principle. So there'll be an uplift for unsecured debt, which again, we think is not necessary and would be costly. The much better option would be this special purpose vehicle, state-owned, treasury-controlled, backed by government, which offers to voluntarily buy out Eskom's current debt, and then refinances that debt on more attractive terms. Matthew's gone through some of the options that can accomplish that. We also have put forward the possibility of a blended climate-linked finance facility, so concessionary finance coming into Eskom on the condition that the planned decommissioning of coal plants, old coal plants, expensive coal plants, happens. It's increasingly more expensive to keep those old coal power plants going than getting new generation. So the Cosatu proposal uses this SPV vehicle. I think the key issue now is to really debate how the refinancing happens, which sort of parties come in here, and how that refinancing is linked to the restructuring of Eskom's business. So let's just talk a little bit about the restructuring. The President a year ago in Sona made a very strong statement about separating generation, transmission and distribution. And let's remind ourselves why. There are 2 broad reasons for doing that. The one is operational businesses right now. Running a distribution business is very different to running a generation business. Distribution is customer facing. It's about selling electricity to customers. Generation is about keeping power stations running. It's a different kind of skill set, different set of managerial focus. And we think unbundling, still state-owned, but 3 separate entities, will create more focus, more transparency, be easier to regulate, and we'll start getting efficiencies. I mean, it's interesting. Got one of my PhDs to review what's happened globally. 106 countries have done this, have separated their generation, transmission, and distribution. But there's a second important reason, is that it really transforms the power sector, because once you take out the transmission system with the system operator and the market operator, you create a transparent platform for procuring least cost power. So Eskom Power obviously will still be a major part of this mix, but you create a sustainable mechanism for enabling private investment to also help to come and keep the lights on. And I think the question now is no longer whether we will unbundle or not. This has been affirmed by Cabinet. There was the Eskom paper, you remember, in October last year, and all the ministers have said that this is the path we're going on. It's just a question, I think, now of how it's done and how quickly it's done. So you can see on that diagram there, at the moment we have Eskom Holdings as a holding company, and it's vertically integrated. Generation, the transmission and system operator and distribution is all in one company, and then IPPs sell to the system operator buyer. What we're saying is we'll take that middle bit of the business out first, right? As a subsidiary company, still state-owned, but with its own board. So the transmission and the system operator become a separate entity, state-owned, it's the heart of the system, but then it really creates the opportunity, as I say, for accelerating investment into the sector. And why does this investment? Well, this is a difficult table, but I just wanted to show you, this is an outlook of the power sector for the next few weeks. In fact, this was in November, but it doesn't look too different now. All of those squares should be green, rather than yellow or red or black. They indicate the severity of the power shortages. Matthew mentioned the extraordinary cost to the economy of load shedding, and this has been quantified, and it now runs into hundreds of billions of rand. It's contributing to the recession. And it's happening primarily because the performance of Eskom's power plants has declined. So this is the EAF factor. It used to be above 90% on average availability. There have been times over Christmas it's been below 60%. It's very, very difficult to turn that around now. That plant hasn't been maintained properly for 15 years. It's been run hard, and it's very old. I think the new management team might be able to stabilize it, but they're not going to get dramatic improvements. It's just simply too old. In fact, some of the plant they've already cannibalizing. They're closing units, taking parts to fix other power stations. And so the consequence is that we are about, by Eskom's count and by CSR's count, we are about 7,000 megawatts short now. We have to do the urgent tasks to get that extra capacity on the system. And so you've seen the IRP, and the IRP says what are those next least cost items that should come on. And you can see in the middle around that red circle is because the yellow ones have already been contracted, but the green is the next to be contracted, and the least cost, next urgent investments need to be solar and wind and need to be run in the REAP 5. And Chair, this is, I think, my second last slide. There's a lot of discussion around IPPs being expensive. And you can see that the round one projects were very expensive, the ones that were procured in 2011. But we've seen extraordinary price reductions in the last few years. In solar, we've seen reductions of about 80% in prices, and wind about 55%. So if we run REAP 5, the Renewable Energy IPP program, to procure our next power, we will see prices, according to my PhD students who look at auctions, renewable energy auctions internationally, we will see prices below 40 cents. Now remember, Eskom's average supply now is around 6 cents. So this helps Eskom if we start contracting this kind of power. So in summary, Chair, Eskom's debt trap, I think, is the most serious issue to resolve, and it needs to be resolved soon. It's now quite clear that even with all the efforts we're putting into Eskom to fix Eskom, Eskom will not be able to keep the lights on by itself. It doesn't have the balance sheet to invest in new generation capacity. It has to deal with its debt problem first. It cannot borrow sufficient amounts of debt now to finance new generation capacity. And so we have to open up the market for new power. Having an independent transmission and system operator facilitates that, as well as regulatory reforms by the energy minister, which makes it easier for companies and businesses to generate their own power. And this is all happening within a global context of extraordinary innovation. You saw again from Matthew's presentation, what are those future technologies that we need to be thinking about around localization? It's renewables, it's battery technology, it's electric vehicles. The world is shifting very, very quickly, and the competitive technologies are these new technologies. And I guess our choices are, will we embrace them and help this transition? If we resist them, I think we're not resolving our core problems. So thank you for your attention, Chair.
Thank you, Professor. I think the two presenters were very disciplined, and we are still on track in terms of the time. I hope the next one is also going to be following that example. We are going to the Energy Intensive Users Group of Southern Africa. Mr. Nick Donson, I think it's your chance now. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, honourable members. Just very briefly, I must congratulate the previous speakers. I think there's some very good points that were raised. As the Energy Intensive Users Group, I'd like to just firstly introduce ourselves and then give you some ideas of how we see things as problems that Eskom present to us, and some of the things that we think may help in the solution. And I must emphasize that I think all of our members would support the view that there's no simple solution. This is a multi-dimensional problem, exactly as the gentleman from Cosatu raised. It is not a simple problem to solve. So briefly, the Energy Intensive Users Group was founded back in 1999. It's a voluntary non-profit association. It has some 29 large energy-intensive users. That number is shifting a little bit. It's probably there's one recently joined, so it may be 30 now. But importantly, it represents some 40% of total Eskom sales. Our membership is roughly 22% of the GDP, and a very significant number of workers in South Africa. And I must emphasize, the membership is extremely sensitive to that fact that we are a big employer and there are a lot of jobs at stake. I think the The key focus areas for the EIUG are certainly the quality of the supply, which I'll touch on in a moment, the reliability of supply, which we've seen has been challenged in recent periods, and very definitely the affordability. Just carrying on a little bit on some of the background. So who are these big users and what do they do? It's basically heavy industry, typically smelters, not only smelters, but large industries that have individual units of consumption that are between typically 30 to possibly even 100 megawatt per individual unit of operation. So these are operations, because of their energy intensity, they operate 24 hours a day typically, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. In simple commercial terms, I think you could, given the size of that consumer base and the type of load that we represent, you could really view us as the basic income for Eskom. Now, just taking a look at that in a bit more context, while energy and electricity is not the only element in our manufacturing cost account for our members, it's certainly a very important, if not the single most important cost element. Very typically constituting 25 to 30% of the manufacturing cost account. I think anybody in anybody's normal terms, that's a big chunk of your salary or income. And obviously, given the type of consumption pattern, the 24/7, 365, the reliability of the supply and the cost competitiveness, and here I'm really referring to a global cost competitiveness, is vital to this sector. It's also, coincidentally, and I think Professor Ebert will concur, without this type of load, the existing Eskom as we know becomes unviable. Now that may change in time, but certainly as it stands at the moment, base load is essential to Eskom. Without it, our regular prices of electricity would rise significantly with the rise and fall of demand during the day and on a weekly basis. So Eskom has clearly faced a number of significant challenges over the past 1 to 2 decades. I think the results, as we've heard, are all clear. We've got stagnating or regressing electricity supply growth, or diminished sales effectively, a rapidly escalating cost base, and there's recently been, particularly in the last couple of years, we all know, the growing element of unreliability in the supply. This is obviously a huge challenge for large power users. The consequence, however, is that both, in our case, both the supplier, being Eskom, and our members, being large consumers, are inevitably faced with some bleak realities, and we need really very, very incisive and very prudent interventions for survival. Now, stress survival. Okay, some of the significant problems from our perspective that we see facing Eskom. We know that, and Professor Ebert touched on it, that for long periods there's been neglected maintenance on most of Eskom's units. It's only the recent new builds that are really young. However, in our sector, age is not a specific problem. I think in any society, age is not a problem. It's the lack of diligent care and maintenance in taking care of that aged plant. And I us as the EIUG, we have a lot of aging plant and are quite familiar with the maintenance of it. Doesn't make it easy, doesn't make it cheap, but it is possible. A second factor, apart from the old fleet, is obviously the underperformance of the new build fleet. This is a clear and pressing challenge. It's an extraordinary one and has to be very carefully contemplated. So clearly, in all of that, I can stress in the underperformance of the new build fleet, I'm stressing that it has to be fixed. So not only do we have to maintain and fix, in a sense, the older plant, we have to fix the new plant. I'll say we, it's a collective problem. In the background, well, firstly, it's obviously urgent. This is an issue that cannot wait. We know that the cost of load shedding and the sort of outflows of that broken system are horrendous for the economy. As background, Eskom, we know, is in a precarious position with its tariff structures. They claim certainly that the tariff structures are inadequate, and as Professor Ebert indicated, at face value, this is certainly the case. There's no doubt that we have problems on the tariff structure. We believe the multi-year price determinant, or MYPD methodology, is not really relevant, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail, but it's not really relevant in the current scenario and going forward. And we stress, obviously, that Eskom costs are out of control, and we need urgent and detailed intervention to render affordable power to the country. Okay, some cautions. And here I'd like to just elaborate a little bit. At this stage, Eskom is in an involved program of looking at how to actually address the deep maintenance, as it's termed, whereby it would take out some roughly 5 gigawatt from its notional somewhere between 28 and 30 gigawatt of available power. But that leaves us with a significant drop that the country has to face. I mean, it's no joke to anyone, I believe, in this room, the stage 6 load shedding that we went to late last year. Certainly, we're talking of that order of magnitude of load reduction, and possibly even higher, which means that the reliable base load capacity of some 23 gigawatt has to be maintained and is essential. As a large user group, we don't outright support the deep load shedding and extraction of 5 gigawatt of load at the moment for deep maintenance. We're cognitive and support that maintenance has to be done, but we're also extremely cautious and caution on the effect of deep load shedding to the economy. Certainly to the energy intensive sector, it's very injurious to the type of equipment that we have and operate. As I say, the maintenance program is unquestionable. It has to be done, but in a way that the fix and supply criteria are simultaneously satisfied. A couple of further cautions. Currently, much of the energy-intensive sector is facing a variety of economic hardships. This is from international competition. A number of the operations are near distress or actually in financial distress situations. And here I'd like to just refresh the importance of electricity in their manufacturing accounts, constituting some 25 to 30% of that account. So the consequences of that are that some of the industries have closed down, some have moved offshore, very unfortunate, but a consequence. And several at the moment are undergoing detailed and urgent cost-cutting measures to the extent that they possibly can. And a number are in the Section 189 process in terms of the Mine Health and Safety Act. Very, very unfortunate, but an inevitable consequence of where we are with Eskom. And it's not solely Eskom's fault, and we'll come on to that in a moment. So, again, to stress in that background, moderate and certainly severe load curtailment for large customers, particularly with an unpredictability factor, is going to be extremely injurious, not just to the equipment, but ultimately to the organizations themselves, as obviously fixed costs start rising and the enterprises just further enter jeopardy in terms of financial position. Just to summarize, a factor that's really important in all of that is that the predictability of the electricity supply, the availability, predictability, and the competitive pricing of it are key in the survival of this sector. And I'll go back and reiterate, this is 40% of the total power that's consumed in South Africa. Without that 40%, Eskom can't survive, and we won't get affordable power. So we by no means have all the solutions. It would be great if we could, but we can pass some comments in that regard. Firstly, on the cost and tariff structure side, they're vital to consider and have to be considered in an innovative way. We believe beyond the current structure of relatively rigid, Eskom might say, in passing, cost-reflective tariff structure, but clearly this isn't the whole story. The current tariffs for large power users contain a significant element of cross-subsidies. Now the exact proportion depends on where they're located, the exact pattern of consumption that they go through, but it's at least of the order of 14% of the total cost of electricity that they consume. And in some cases, that members claim up to 20%, so we'd have to verify that independently. But it's a large proportion. And here we start coming to the social compact that was mentioned earlier. We start touching on a number of issues that are multidimensional. In order to alleviate that stress on this sector, we're saying those tariff subsidies are likely necessary. In certainly a country developing like ours, we believe they are necessary. Be cautious. The sector that is actually largely, not singularly, but largely picking up that tab is actually in threat. It's in jeopardy. So some reallocation. It's not simple to just take from Peter and give to Paul. That won't necessarily work. But we have to think about constructively how that cross-subsidy can be. Firstly, the stress of the cross-subsidy on large users can be reduced, and how it can be funded in alternative ways. Secondly, on the extended maintenance program, the AIUG having members that actually are generators themselves through members that are very, very large consumers, have offered Eskom assistance in a variety of planning phases to try and coordinate the outage that Eskom intends and hopefully will table before Parliament in due course. I believe it is scheduled certainly before the end of March that it will be tabled, possibly to this committee or certainly one similar, a program of extended and deep maintenance. But we call on, through you, Mr. Chairman, honourable members, we as large users have a capacity to an extent, minimize outages on the consumer side to correlate with Eskom's requirements. It may seem trivial, but we believe it is especially important in a symbiotic relationship, seeking to keep costs down, to minimize disruption to the economy, and try and embed an element of certainty in an otherwise very unpredictable situation. There are also some of the large consumers that can, for periods of time, totally reduce their load very significantly. Not the 5 gigawatt that is targeted by Eskom for reduction for their deep maintenance, but certainly some fraction of that, 1, 2 gigawatt at times possibly, but this would have to be planned very carefully in collaboration with Eskom. We're saying this is a tangible, viable option to reduce the impact of an unpredictable situation that would evolve otherwise. I think, just in summary, and I know time is important for us all, it's crucial that between NERSA and the relevant government departments, that we look at a longer-term pricing strategy to better ensure the sustainability of the energy-intensive sector. This might sound a little bit trite or maybe incongruous, given the fact that Eskom is in a dire position economically. What we're saying is no, not just Eskom, South Africa is. And unless this is given attention, South Africa Inc. is going to suffer the consequences. Unfortunately, there are multiple elements that have to be looked at. As we mentioned, the cross-subsidies, this is rural electrification, indigent, obviously subsidization for indigent power usage. All of those have to be considered. They're valid. It's not at all that we're saying that they should not exist. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is beware of where it's placed, where the burden is placed. At the moment, that burden is being carried heavily by energy-intensive users, and they are under financial stress. The second one has been touched on by both previous speakers, is that obviously Eskom has to address cost-cutting challenges. And I think some of this was relayed in Professor Eberhard's communication, was that the mandate to Eskom via NERSA has to be broader, and we have to look at reducing costs, whether it's going to renewables at a much lower cost, whatever it is, it has to be considered in a collective way. And together with that, in the background, there's the sound maintenance and fixed programs that are desperately needed, but we have to ensure that they're adequately funded. And that is a separate, I don't want to divert time or energy into going into that subject, but it is a clear concern from our side as large energy users. We know large power plants, these aren't cheap to fix and maintain. If Eskom's budget is already under stress, this deep maintenance program needs to be well funded, and it needs the prudency to go with it, to make sure that it's adequately funded. Crucial that it achieves the results that are desired. In other words, plants are returned to reliable service and minimum disruption results to the consumers at large. I think lastly, that the Department of Public Enterprises ensure that the Eskom restructuring, Professor Eberhard again touched on it, that this is done in a very prudent fashion that avoids a drain of skills, funding, and the like. And the last thing we need are more dysfunctional state-owned entities. They've got to be prudently done, prudently managed, and efficiently coordinated. The coordination between these is crucial. That's between the generation, the distribution, and transmission. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. We will also quickly go to Solidarity. Mr. Dion Jenkins is here. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable members. Chairperson, Solidarity has formally responded to your office regarding the invitation for today's engagement surrounding Eskom's operational and financial activities. Solidarity is concerned about the influence of the energy crisis on the economy and committed to engagement to facilitate a fair solution to South Africa's energy crisis. Chair, unfortunately, we only received the invitation on the afternoon of the 2nd of March, and as such, we will not be able to meaningfully engage during the Portfolio Committee meeting today due to scheduling conflicts. We are, however, committed to helping solve South Africa's energy crisis, and therefore Solidarity has delegated myself to attend this session as an observer. Chair, my attendance does not constitute in approval or the rejection of any proposals. We would need to study any such proposals in more detail. We were therefore unable to send a full delegation, Chair, but we look forward to meaningfully engaging the Portfolio Committee in the future. Thank you, Chair.
My apology if you receive, it's a pity the Secretary is not here, if you receive the invite late, because I think we have, it was confirmed to me before that time that invites have been sent to most of the stakeholders. Now, I will also give to, I understand them because they are not going to have a long presentation. They need just a bite. Is out organization against tax abusers.
It's very difficult to follow and make notes when we don't have the presentations in front of us. Can we not ask, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is there no way the Professor, EI, UG, and Outer could not email the Secretary the presentation so we can get them printed at least? Please.
Thank you so much, comrade, colleagues, and friends. We, not quite gate crashing, but we became aware of this meeting and felt we would like to have some input. So I do apologize, but we didn't prepare any PowerPoint. However, we would like to offer the submission that we made to NERSA, which is a 100-page document, as well as the submission that is currently being made to the Finance Committee on the budget, which contains certain factors relating to Eskom as well, which we will certainly forward to you for your consideration. So we want to have a little bit of space as a civil society organization, maybe a slightly different perspective to Cosatu and other experts that have presented here, and business. But so I'm just going to make a few points, sort of highlights from the submissions that we've been making around Eskom, and we're very willing to engage further at a later date or whenever you feel appropriate. So I think one of the critical things for us is that energy is the critical driver of the economy, but Eskom is only one part of it. And so from our perspective, what we would like to see is more focus on the energy system and to ensure that we have energy security for all. And I think there's been a lack of focus, for example, on efficiency. If we use energy more efficiently, then we would relieve the load of Eskom to supply in this crisis time. And for this, we would point to you, there was something like 100 million rand wasted full expenditure in the Department of Energy's budget through the storage of solar water heaters, which were then not rolled out into households, which would have taken a small amount, but little steps. We would also then point out, for us, the critical factor has been how Eskom is determining the numbers. And we feel there needs to be a searchlight really shone into the depths of energy, of Eskom's technical team. And I just want to give you a couple of examples. So, despite the fact that for the last 6 years, at least 6 years, various municipalities have been indicating that their demand is lowering. And despite the fact that, for example, the Eastern Cape has also indicated it has a different wheeling arrangement and is therefore able to reduce its demand on Eskom for electricity, these factors have not been included in the way that Eskom calculates the demand, and obviously that demand translates into the revenue. So by getting these basic calculations wrong, what it's happening is every year Eskom projects it will get so much revenue and it's a shortfall. And as other speakers have said, the pricing system is therefore wrong. So structurally we need the rules to change so that the entity is forced to do its homework. And we feel quite strongly that the manner in which this has been happening it's either gross incompetence or it's corruption. You have to ask deep questions. And seeing as this is the year of orange overalls, we think that there needs to be a focus on really looking at the technical side of how are the numbers being run, so that we make sure that those people who maybe have been deliberately manipulating things are out of the picture. Then I think the other aspect we would just like to highlight is just poor households. So when the tariff goes up, it doesn't have the same impact on rich households and poor households. And in fact, an HSRC study some years back showed that the impact on poor household is 6 times the impact on a rich household when you put the tariff up. So adjusting the tariffs to make more money to bail out Eskom, which is in effect what we've been doing, is not going to work and is causing increasing hardship. And this also relates to the municipal debts. Is the municipalities, and I'm sure you could ask Salga, but have been making the point that because people can't buy electricity because it's too expensive, they don't have the money, they're not getting the revenue in to pay Eskom. So, there's this spiral that's happening at a municipality as well as at Eskom. So I think there needs to be some high-level discussions in terms of the whole means that the electricity supply industry operates, where the revenue comes from, how it's derived, and that we need to move away from this assumption that people can pay and will pay, that it's a captive audience. And from our perspective, what we've seen over time is Eskom basically holding the public to ransom time and time again. If we don't put the tariffs up, we're going to switch the lights out. So we're now in a very dire situation. And I think for us there are a couple of principles in terms of you looked for solutions. We believe that the unbundling, restructuring into the 3 SOEs gives us an opportunity for transparency. And one of our sort of analyses was that, for example, the costs of the workers at the power stations is not calculated in the cost of coal in the way that Eskom presents its numbers. It's somewhere else. So it's difficult for anyone to kind of look and see what is the best way forward if the costs are not transparent. So we really believe that having that independent transmission SOE, government must always control the wires, will really give us assistance going forward. We would also just like to make a comment on the IPPs. And much as the professor has spoken about the decrease of costs, we agree, but as a developmental side of things, there were many organizations who came forward with projects which were collectives, community-owned renewable energy projects, which didn't make the grade because they were obviously to run a community-owned project, which was a lot more community development, was slightly more expensive than maybe your strict large power players. So, if we're looking at different spaces where people can actually use this as a developmental model, community development, owning a power plant and selling to a local municipality, for example, we start to gain in the country. We want to support Cosatu in terms of the jobs. Okay. Thought I was being shut up there. So in terms of the jobs, we believe that is a high principle. We can't afford to lose any more jobs. And we would also point to I think it's 6.7 million people who are looking for jobs. So this is a sector where we can localize. We don't have to. I've visited factories in the Western Cape where they were producing solar panels. It's possible to do, and there was a whole women who were being employed as well. So there's a lot of space for that. And I also maybe point out that many years ago, a vehicle manufacturing company was saying that windshields, the same technology you use for windshields, you can use for those solar mirrors for the big solar plants. So just maybe finally to say, we're a little bit skeptical of how you put money into Eskom, because we think there have been many bailouts with conditions, which Eskom seems to not really comply with. So maybe a little bit more creativity around how we can force compliance. And then I think my last point is simply from the process perspective. I'm sitting here presenting to you, my colleague is presenting to the Finance Committee, and another colleague of mine is busy monitoring the Copter Committee, all of which are talking about Eskom. And from our perspective, we would maybe humbly suggest that an ad hoc committee in Parliament, pooling different members from different committees, might be a useful way to be able to conduct oversight in Eskom, because we do wonder where the CEO gets time to work at Eskom, because he seems to spend a lot of time reporting to various committees in Parliament. So I think that's really those few comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Outa. Honorable members, before I come to you now, I just want to check first if there is any other person who wanted to say something on this side. Thank you so much. I think they have exhausted now is the time for honorable members to engage the input. I see you, Honorable Mare. I see you, Honorable Kwanazi. Yes, according to 4 of you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. It's not a few remarks. It was very comprehensive that was presented to the committee, and I therefore thanks everybody that given the input today. The first fact that we have to state and say it loud and clear, that Eskom is insolvent, point. Look at the balance sheet and you can see it. So what the worrying factor is here is that the taxpayer can't continue, and that is now the state, to bail out any more state-owned companies on a continuous basis. So what happened since 2008? Bad management, the looting and corruption within Eskom, and surely we have to go after those people that have actually stolen money from Eskom or taxpayers. Now, municipalities, on the other hand, also have to bring their pound of meat and pay within 30 days. It's an enormous amount that is outstanding for the various municipalities within South Africa. But I also, at the same time, I would say thank you to those, and there are some of them that pay within 30 days. We have actually to acknowledge that. Cosatu did state it about the employees that nobody must go and that must keep them all, no retrenchments. And that has also been touched by one of the other members, that actually the last speaker, as far as unemployment is the number of and percentage of unemployment, specifically of young people in South Africa, and we can't actually afford to have more unemployed people in South Africa. But we have to agree, as we sit here as well, that the organigram of Eskom is bloated. So there must be a way be found between retrenchments and the organigram that is definitely wrong, that is currently in place. But the serious problem is actually the interest on this large amount of debt that is killing Eskom monthly. And the repayment of debt together with that interest on the debt. And that's where we're all sitting in this room, all of us, is contributing to actually to that bailout on a continuous basis. So I just want to make a remark on, we really now must sign off and go ahead with as much as possible green energy, renewable energy, and it must be sustainable, the contribution into the grid of Eskom. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Honorable Chairperson, I would like to welcome the engagements, the presentations, and also to emphasize on what you have said, that this is the ongoing stakeholders engagement, and out of it, we'll be able to learn from each other's experience, knowledge, expertise. But the main interest, I think we must not lose focus, Chair, pardon my voice, that we are looking for solutions in all what we've engaged. Chairperson, I just want to welcome the presentation by Cosatu on the fact that they are also citing the issue of saying whatever that we're doing and whatever that we are contributing to Eskom, we need to not lose focus on that it's a main economic growth and the welfare of the national needs, Eskom that is sustainable, electricity that is affordable and reliable. So we must not lose focus on that, because that is the core mandate and of this SOE in particular. But it is, unfortunately, Chair, the time, we don't have a luxury of time in making sure that we fix whatever that we are, the challenge that we are facing. It also requires a social compact as it is presented. Chair, I just want to have a few clarity questions. Firstly, on Cosatu. One is on their pro-worker Eskom turnaround plan interventions. I just want to check their proposal on the practical part of it, on the municipal funding model. On the proposal is that we must have to pay directly to Eskom, and the practical side of that, because Currently, the arrangement, some municipalities, they use electricity to make sure they also make some profit, but also to make sure that residents who are consumers out there, they are paying for rates and services. But also on the issue of, I think it's point 11, if I'm not mistaken, the electricity tariffs must be affordable for consumers, industry, and for exports to the neighboring states. I just want to check their proposal on the affordability Lokunjan plan. But Chair, the issue of on the conditions of which I support, I fully support the conditions on especially on workers and on retrenchment. But can you elaborate? I just want to get the name exactly, Comrade Matthew, on the bloated management and management packs. Can you elaborate your plan, Lokunjan, out there? And I also support the issue of workers, a presentation on the Eskom board. But I also want to check what would be your view on the issue of that representation vis-a-vis the other unions in the Lokunjan in the sector. But you said it's an ongoing engagement, and there's no, if you disagree or we agree, I think we must take that positively. Chair, I must register my disappointment on the non-submission of solidarity. I was looking for, I think we'll find the space and time to engage on their submission. Because I wanted to check their position, because they've been, I think there's a communication, or there's a saying out there by the solidarity that they took this proposal by Eskom as a controversial plan to finance Eskom. So I was really interested to that statement, or for them to elaborate on that statement, to say if they take that proposal as very controversial, what will be their Lokunjan, their plan vis-a-vis Lokunjan on that. But other than that, Chair, I really. But also on Eskom, on Cosatu, my apology. I would really love Cosatu together with us, Chair, and the media out there, to elaborate and not to distort or on the issue of workers' pensioners and the issue of the conditions that they are placing on Lokunjan, on Eskom investment. That would be my take for now, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Solidarity, I think, made the point that they have received the invite to this portfolio committee only on the 2nd, of which, if we fair, really it's not a good time to be able to prepare themselves for the session. Honorable Waters.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the presenters. If I could refer to the Cosatu presentation, and sorry if I do ask a lot of questions, but you're the only one that kindly submitted the presentation beforehand, but so thank you for that. One could prepare. On page 7, you talk about the fact that you want guaranteed bonds from the government. The fact is there is no money in the cupboard, as old Mother Hubbard found out. And so therefore guaranteed bonds are actually meaningless to pensioners who want to invest their hard-earned money into Eskom or any other SOE, for that example. It's a risk, a huge risk. And the guarantee that is by more debt, which is the least thing we want. So I'd just like your comment on that. Secondly, you talk about having representation on the board, and that would, root out corruption and maladministration and capture, etc. But the fact is, Cosatu in particular has seats in Parliament via the ANC. And while you do have representation in Parliament, the fact is state capture and corruption happened under your noses. And in fact, I would say your members turned a blind eye and aided and abetted it. So why would, if they couldn't fight state capture in Parliament, why on earth would they be able to do it on the board? Where I do agree with you is on page 9 of your presentation about tackling the corruption and what to do with the board members. What I would like to suggest, so Chair, here on page 9, we cross out the board and say Cabinet, past and present members. So arrest, prosecute, confiscate assets and imprison those who have looted. Cabinet members, past and present. Dismiss and freeze assets of past and present cabinet members who have broken the country. Comprehensive forensic public audit of all past and present cabinet members. And have a look at all the deals they may or may not have with any SOEs or any other entities, past and present. Because it's only when we arrest politicians will we actually start fighting corruption. We can arrest all the board members of any entity you like. No one knows who they are. Politicians need to start wearing those orange overalls, not board members. But they can also wear them, don't get me wrong, board members. But we need to start here across the road with that cabinet. So if we can just ask a few questions as well, Chair. And this is unfortunately only one union here, but that's presented, but would Cosatu be averse to a ballot of all current and retired members of the PRC to ask them if they are prepared to risk their pensions into SOEs? And if not, why won't you agree to that? This is to the Professor. You didn't mention the reduction of employees as a cost-cutting measure. You highlighted it on the slide. You talked about coal, which is obviously one that needs to be addressed, but you didn't talk about employees. And yes, I understand we have 10.4 million people unemployed in the country, and we don't want an additional 17,000 added onto that. But sometimes in order to save an entity, you have to take tough decisions to turn it around in order for it to become viable and start growing again and maybe over the long term employ a few more people. So could you just explain why you never mentioned that? And do you think it is a necessity to actually retrench those 17,000 workers? Then, if we do get downgraded on the 27th of March, which is expected, right, does that make Eskom bonds and sovereign bonds junk status? And would that prevent any pension fund from investing in those bonds? And if so, then what happens to the proposal put on the table by Cosatu, for example? And maybe the Professor could talk to them, anyone else could talk to that, I don't mind. And then lastly, it's back to Cosatu. While you've asked or suggested that people risk their pensions in funding Eskom, and including members of Parliament, and I agree, if we expect public servants to do it, then members of Parliament must risk their own pensions as well. However, I haven't seen anything in your presentation where Eskom themselves are investing in, Cosatu themselves are investing in Eskom or any other SOE. Are you prepared to do that? And why was it omitted from your presentation? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I've got just 3 very short questions, but I want to repeat what my colleagues have said. When Cosatu was presenting, trying to emphasize the importance of Eskom, he spoke of some sacrifices that needs to be done. So I'm not sure that I omitted hearing him elaborating on that as to what do they consider on the part of Cosatu to be a sacrifice on the part of Cosatu as the union. Secondly, he spoke of a progress that has been made in as far as dealing with corruption. you can mention two or one of those things that he consider as a progress in as far as tackling corruption is concerned. The last question is that as Cosatu, they have put two conditions, of which one of them is that government must commit that Eskom won't be privatized. I'm very interested in hearing as to, from their point of view, why do they consider privatization as a no. Take into account what he said in his presentation on page 5 on the options and consequences, that if we continue doing things the way we do, and also take into account the fact that government does not have capacity to turn things around, is it not time that we consider PPPs in this regard? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Peel.
Thank you, Chair. Let me join my colleagues in welcoming the presentation made by both the presenters, even though there are others who did not give us a document, but let me have a bite and say, firstly, to Cosatu, I'm impressed. I'm expressing my view. I'm impressed. The proposal, you know, in this, the agenda is very much clear, Chair. In all these presenters, it says they must, or they are coming to present an operational financial challenges facing Eskom and give possible solutions. These presenters, only two, Cosatu and the professor, gave us solutions. And before I could start questioning and make appeal to everybody in the House and stakeholders to say, we believe that when you come to Parliament or portfolio committees, you are bringing solutions as South Africans. We want all the entities to be viable and work together. So in this sense, it tells us that whoever comes here have a vision, have this thing of wanting SOEs to be back into their feet and function very correctly. But Chair, allow me to say to Cosatu, as my colleague alluded, there's a saying that in your proposal, or there's an argument to say whatever actions that you take and to use employees' pensions funds to save any entity, whether it's Eskom, SAA, or whatsoever, it will fall outside the mandate of the GEDPF and the PIC, and it will also be a breach of contractual agreement with the members of the fund. Can you give us a synopsis, or what is your take on that, or any guarantees that will make your members to feel free and agree fully into your proposal? And under your presentation on page 10, there's one of my colleagues raised that, but I want to rephrase it in this fashion of saying, you want a representation to the board. How will you, it's not only Cosatu or only your federations that affiliate to Cosatu in the industry of energy, or Eskom in particular. There are other unions that does not fall under Cosatu. The representation, have you looked into it? How will you manage it? Who must sit there? As much as you have outlined it very correctly to say you want to uproot corruption, but then what is your plan so that it must include everybody? seated here as members of parliament, we are not taking sides. We are not talking about any political party, but as representatives of majority of South Africans, who is going to sit? How have you came across this idea? Have you thought about it correctly? And how will it assist for you as union members or federations not to fight amongst going to sit in the particular board? In your page 12, you know, I've been a representative in the local sphere. I know and understand what is happening in municipalities, but and also what our ordinary citizens are going through or coming across. It will assist in your point 2, a single payment account that must be established for all who can pay directly to Eskom, because really indeed there's a lot, it's a hike. Indigent households are suffering from paying a lot of money to buy electricity in municipalities that has got licensing to sell electricity through direct. But then, because we are aware that those municipalities, they generate revenue from selling electricicity, and you went further and said there must be a remodeling or a restructuring or re-looking at the funding of municipalities. Do you have any concrete or any proposal to the cabinet, to parliament? How will it fit for municipalities to be funded better? Because I believe it's all about working together. Yourself as members of federations and all stakeholders that are here, how will you, what is your proposal? Because you need to tell us, while you have taken through your presentation to say we need to re-look into that. We are re-looking into that together with yourself who came with the idea. What is your main idea in re-looking to refunding or the modeling of municipalities? While we are aware, especially municipalities that are not metros, they are suffering. They can't survive, especially those who are having licensing from Eskom to sell electricity. How best can you try to measure the finance that they are getting from selling electricity through your proposal? And lastly, Chair, to the Professor, on the 3 elements that he has raised, because we don't have your package, but you explained it correctly, that one, the state can take the debt you mentioned, but coming to the third mechanism, you did not give us your projections. You only on Cosatu. But then my belief is that if you are aware, everybody is aware about the proposal of Cosatu, why didn't you take it into consideration? And how best, you tell us, because you are a professor who understands the energy sector better and the finances, if I'm correct, why didn't you even give us your thinking of how best can it fit in? Because all of us, we are aware that government does not have money, parliament does not have money to bail out. Then there's a proposal that says we can with 1, 2, 3. Then why don't you include that in mind and in your proposal to say, if we take the route of Cosatu, this is going to happen, this must not happen. Then I'm saying, because it's an engagement, we can't say we are rejecting or accepting, but it's an engagement for us to fix Eskom and all state entities. Then I'm saying in future, maybe you can have a bite. If you are afraid, maybe you are afraid to tell us what is your view about Cosatu. In the near future, can you deliberate on that? Because you gave two part, but the third part you gave a question mark. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I want to say, extend my disappointment to those who were invited in time and did not submit their presentations. I think we must agree as the committee that no one will come and present here without having submitted through your office, because your office should actually vet everything that comes to the committee. You should not be surprised like all of us when you see a presentation. But mainly people do that when they've got nothing to offer, like we've seen in the morning. Cosatu, I welcome your presentation, but it's based on mainly bailing out. How do we get more funding? Who do we approach and all that? It doesn't tell us how Eskom is going to improve their efficiency, because it's not going to help us to get money from IMF or anywhere else when we're still going to be in the same inefficient situation that currently we have been faced. And when we look at Eskom, really, we all come here and talk about the challenges and crises of Eskom, but they are created by white monopoly capital. It is the white monopoly capital that owns the mines. It is them that are refusing to pay prices as directed by NERSA. They are determining their own prices. And why are they doing that? They're doing that because they want to collapse Eskom. And once they collapse Eskom, they take it over. Even the bailout that you're going to get, the money that you're going to get, is going to go back to white monopoly capital, because those are the people that Eskom owes. And now workers must be threatened with being retrenched and all that when they've got nothing. They did nothing really to put Eskom to where it is. Now, for me, the first thing is we need to improve efficiency at Eskom and also streamline processes. And Prof, you say to us that there's going to be an unbundling of Eskom. It's not going to happen. There's no unbundling that is going to happen at Eskom. Maybe in Holland, but not here in South Africa. So we can assure you that Eskom will not be unbundled. Now, Cosatu and the other unions, I want them to push government and ask a question. Why can't the coal mines, because they've got a concession, they've got a mining license that they're operating for a certain period of time, they can't be making money when the sole provider of the electricity is not making money. We can't have companies that depend on Eskom to give them electricity making huge profits when Eskom is not making profits. So I'm putting a challenge to say the coal mines, they must give, so Eskom must go and check how much coal do they need to give each and every coal mining company should then give that coal for free to Eskom until such time that Eskom is back on its feet, it's making money and is able to run itself. Because if you don't do that, and we are bullied by these mining companies who are paying the rates that they're determined by themselves, then we fall in the same trap of allowing white monopoly capital to dictate what needs to happen to our entity. And the third challenge to Cosatu, I'm referring to Cosatu because really they're the ones who made a presentation that is worth being attended to here. Go and check those evergreen contracts of Eskom. What is happening with those evergreen contracts? How come we're having evergreen contracts? Why can't we cancel them if they are the ones who are crippling Eskom to be what it is today? And I saw somebody presenting about IPPs. IPPs must be cancelled with immediate effect. They are a model that is not financially viable. You cannot buy electricity at 150 and sell it at 120. It just not happens. And anybody who approves a business case that is in that format should ordinarily be fired, because you are saying government must invest in something that is not financially viable. And yet you are the executive that is being employed to make sure that such things they do not happen. And finally, Chair, is to say, we know people who are not paying Eskom. Cosatu, go and give us a list of everybody who's not paying Eskom. We know there's companies in CDN that are crippling that municipality, that are refusing to pay the rate
that is determined by NARSA. So it's high time that we enlist those companies who are refusing to pay Eskom. And I'll pause it there for now, Chairperson. Thank you.
Honorable Gumede.
Chair, thank you very much. Firstly, let me commend the committee for the decision they took, that they invite the stakeholders to come and share here with us some of the ideas as to how, as Parliament, we may rescue Eskom. I think it's quite appreciated. Thank you for the input that we have given us. Thank you very much, Chair, for your leadership as well. Chair, let me say it's very difficult to be definite of the things that the President would have pronounced. It is my understanding that the unbundling would in fact mean, or its meaning, trying to get efficiency out of the process. If I may simplify that, if a person may be given the whole loaf of bread and be told that eat it, it's difficult, impossible for a person to eat the whole loaf. The best thing you do is that you slice it, and you eat one slice, and you get much more efficient, and you are in a position to say, now we are saturated, we have reached the point of satiety, and then you are fine. So my understanding will be a situation that say, seated here in this committee, because we are accountable somewhere, we may not be definite and say unbundling will never happen. However, it's the powers that may be is in a position to decide all that. Chair, let me say it's, again, I'm joining MP Honorable Nkwanas in saying that, as well as some of us, when we are saying it's unfortunate that Solidarity did not give us their presentation. I'm hoping that very soon we will get the presentation and be in a position to move forward. Chair, it looks as if when we listen to the presentation, let me cover this, that I've seen from my own point of view this presentation complementary to each other, because many of the aspects that were touched, for instance, let me say Cosatu, such aspects were as well repeated by Prof. Prof, to a certain degree, even said he does support the views of Cosatu. So, in a sense, it tells us that some of the ideas that in fact Cosatu holds, Prof does hold, as well as the civil society does hold. The only thing for us that's remaining, I appreciated the idea of an ad hoc committee as much as I don't know how one can handle such a kind of situation. But the chair will then lead us. My understanding of a presentation is to say, perhaps 1, 2, 3, you go and sit in that corner. Give us a composite kind of a plan. When the 3 of you or 4 of you, you would come with a plan having put all the ideas and then come back and present to us. That's how I see perhaps the process unfolding, that we are not going to go out here and say, no, we want to marry with Cosatu or we want to marry with Prof. But at the end of the day, we say, how do we take the process forward? Taking the process forward to say, perhaps just work together and bring us a composite plan, and let's see how perhaps the process will unfold. That's one of the reasons I'm saying it will be good that we get a presentation from Solidarity. Perhaps another element that I would like to highlight here is I know the attitude of mainly the unions. I hope we are not coming here and open up a competition where Cosatu will be competing with Solidarity. But we expect that the two of them, in a context of unions, they will in fact work together. They must understand that this is in fact we want to achieve as perhaps this committee. Chair, I must say that my understanding as well is these plans are, I've looked at, I've listened to the presentation at the Cosatu one. It's, in fact, they are still at a shallow stage. They may be unpacked further. It's a preliminary document. When we say go and unpack it, it says quite a lot of things that in fact aren't complete. So when we want them to be completed, some other things that they've mentioned they are not very much explicit in terms of the installation of a prepaid. I was expecting that they were going to be very much explicit and then say even the communities are expected to be installed those prepaid meters. So that is the expectation that we are saying perhaps Cosatu, or if the chair wants, will then mandate that we need a further discussion to the situation. You go and prepare, because at this stage, up until we exhaust all the stakeholders, then the chairperson in his guidance will be in a position to say, this is the next step that we may want to see. Chair, I wanted to say here the unbundling, especially I would expect this, I'm directing it to all of you, but I'm challenging Cosatu mainly, that the unbundling has always been misconstrued or misinterpreted as a road to privatization. I don't know, what is your take in this kind of a situation? Because we don't want to have a situation where you see the end of the tunnel, but somewhere you'll find a person interrupting or this thing of people always flag. There is even in a presentation by Cosatu, they do mention this thing of privatization as a thorn that threatens them, that workers, if this thing is privatized, in fact, it may mean workers will lose jobs. So I want perhaps the kind of a feedback that what is your interpretation? Is it unbundling, which in fact, from the understanding, it may even influence some of the members as well to find themselves very anti to unbundling. That's why I'm saying I understand the unbundling as trying is one way of being efficient, in the sense that you want to do things so that anyway people, rather than have a big thing that will be difficult for people to understand, to manage. Chair, I think let me stop there for now and see if I get an opportunity, then I'll come back.
Thank you, Honorable Gumede. Honorable Shivalana?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, it's not easy, and as I greet everybody in the House, to really lead. You know, coming from the governing party, you get to appreciate the compact to serve. And what does it mean to serve? It means that you don't see necessarily the exercise we're involved in here as citizens as just an exercise of a job. You see it as opportunity to serve. And that requires one, insofar as interaction, for us to really search deep down and really process what is happening in the country, what is broken, what is it that we want to fix. And I feel that it's rested upon all of us as we engage and really try, perhaps at some point, as much as we might be political parties and representing different constituencies, that it's important that whoever is governing at that point, you try to have some sort of a middle way, because there is constituency, and constituency realities that they want electricity. Energy is important for the country. It's important for economy. It frustrates business. People in hospitals. If there's no energy, it means that people have got potential to die. If, businesses collapse. So how do we want people to survive if the levels of energy in this country are going down and we're not finding solutions? And things that are on the table, our interactions with them are always on the sidelines of sticking through to policy, perhaps that suits that constituency, insofar as being voted in by people. So I really wanted to echo those comments. For me, I think it's very important. On that note, Mr. Chairperson, I want to ask Professor, the President in the SONA addressed the matter of utilization of the pension funds, and that it will not occur recklessly without due motion around other, it might be right-wing groups, perhaps how I see them myself, that will immediately make pronouncements, and we will know that they're always ready to approach the high courts. That's what, ideally, where people stick to their own narrow, perhaps, comfortability insofar as issues of inequality are concerned in the country, and they want to keep the status quo. We know that immediately they will rush to high court and approach. I want to prick your thought around that matter of PIC, if it were to perhaps use the pension funds, if we have the such things that people will go to high court and they will deem to breach the contract agreement with the members of they will see this issue of us saving Eskom or SOEs, that it will fall outside the mandate of the GPF and PIC, and it will be the breach of contractual agreements with the members of the fund itself. I hope I've captured that one. Cosatu, there's lots of submissions that have been made. You are always, every time, you always hear almost as if the labor force in this country, it's a reactionary, it's an ally of the ANC, it's nothing to go by, it offers anything. I'm quite impressed with what I'm getting, because it speaks about, on your page 9, you are putting across comprehensive forensic public audit for all Eskom contract expenditure and debt. So you are addressing matters of corruption. You are saying you want to deal with Eskom managers having corrupt and illegal tenders as Eskom. Now, this labor force, Cosatu, we know for a fact that these are the people, men and women, that make sure that they work, they are workers. But I would want to know, do we have some sort of, it's not about just only patriotism, but our labor force also within these structures, do they really report as in when they see this corruption and as in when it happens? Because you will rely on the same persons, whether it's junior managers, senior managers, they are part of the system. Now, we can't separate our labor force from the system, whether at any level of management. But I want to know further, because we sit here with this corruption, we're worried that we're trying to fix things that let me not say even clever people, but people will sit in supply chain management and find a way to manipulate systems. But the question that I have, do we have a level of interaction with our labor force for them to have that level of serve, of wanting to serve the people? I'm sure when you see corruption, you should be able to say, look here, there is this situation, where do we report? And I want to align that question with a question when you present the board. It goes further to that. When we say labor force must be, or rather, must be represented in the board, who gets to be represented? Who gets to sit there as a public representative, or rather as a union to sit there, and how would you choose them? And I mean, we've got Companies Act, and what law do we really use, or when you apply to mine to say you want to be represented? Because these are persons, these are not machines. As much as you spoke about 4IR, all these things that happened in Eskom are done by human beings. It's pushing paper. So we're saying now we want to oversee, even sit with the board now. What difference is that going to make? I just want to understand it. In which law are we applying that? Now, there's a submission, some comment about arresting of prosecution, confiscating assets, and imprisonment of those who have looted. Look, the orange overalls, my colleague, we would love to see people in orange overalls, but also the level of populism at times in statements, it also doesn't assist us to move forward this country. You know, we are politicians. It doesn't mean all politicians are corrupt. I can sit there and tell you that for a fact, and proudly so. And when we said, let's prosecute cabinet, let cabinet, do we even understand our role and the separation of power and the role in the legislation that governs whether executive members bill and so forth or act? So I'm just saying is that at times, let's try to also assist. We are here to assist. We are the new Sixth Parliament, Professor. So we are ready to listen. We are interested to hear what is it that can be offered, what we can do to move this country forward. So the executive and the orange overalls, that politicians be arrested, for me, I mean, just a statement. The Soweto debt, Professor, rather Cosatu, because you mentioned it as part of dealing with situations that we have, and you explicit, you know, it's easy when you say those who can, people must pay for what they consume. It's easy. We like it, we don't. There's an historical context with it, and people will blame us that we keep on putting apartheid. It's the reality. Those communities are indigent, and those people that are there, most of the time in that Soweto was done by part of a planning and was meant, it is RDP houses. And RDP houses were granted and given, today we call them grandmothers and grandfathers. Ideally, those are the people that today they don't even earn any salary. They should be their retirement or sitting in home raising grandchildren. And with what income? With the grant money. Now, when we easily say, and I understand, and I hear Eskom, Soweto debt is escalating. If it's done in Kailicha, why can't it be done in Soweto? Let's look into scenario for what it is. They are, in fact, those grannies with that pension money are the ones first to go and pay for Eskom. Now, when your electricity, you put meter boxes, and these challenges we find in the system that don't even, the meter cannot even calculate properly how much the person is using. Trams and all of that, we have issues of crime because of societal ills around those communities, cable thefts, illegal connections, crime, and so there is a value chain that is involved around that. So we are hearing, and we agree with you, people must pay for what they can use. And the president says, people, those who can afford to pay must pay. Now, I would have made perhaps, Cosatu, something for you to perhaps think about necessarily. So when we say, let us be able to really collect from Soweto, but let us be able to speak about matters, whether indigenous or not, it depends from municipality. Some of them don't even, it doesn't even exist. But we've got people, those persons are social grants recipient. Why can't we just deduct from them or something like that? It's not a policy of the NC, by the way. And think about it as they earn their money, so that you show you've got. But then you would have challenges of in that one household you've got 10 persons. So user pay, user model, and you check how much you've utilized. But I'm just saying, let's have a better discussion around Soweto. Honestly, Chairperson, I will move that we need to dedicate a day. Eskom must come here and tell us not collecting, because other people who are paying, that being now dealt with because of others who don't pay. Those who afford to pay, they don't pay. A small business, you find some other businesses coming into those communities, they're not paying. You find big businesses like your huge malls, shopping centers being built in those communities that are indigent. And you ask yourself, is that big business or that shopping mall, is it paying Eskom? And how much if it's paying for Eskom that really you would find difficult in collecting from Soweto, if you put it in all brackets, because there's big business. So the Soweto debt must not only be about Soweto, it must also be about big businesses that are not paying. Unbundling, I think we're done with that. We're already in bundling. I'm speaking for the governing party. President has pronounced, so it's not an issue, that one, and there must not be confusion of any sort. I would have also loved to hear about from Solidarity. I mean, there's lots of pronouncements you made, whether on media. It's easy to find your submission. I just thought that you're just going to put it out there because your submissions on Eskom has been explicit during the times, but I wanted to engage with you. So also the fact that you didn't, you're observing, so let me observe your observation around the submission. So Chairperson, Cosatu investing Eskom in other SOEs. Professor, the reduction of employees to 10.4 on issues of unemployment, what do we do in this instance where the ruling party or governing party says there shouldn't be any job loss? Ideally, it doesn't want job losses. There's things that are unavoidable. I want to be truthful about it. But in the instances there is the situation we find ourselves as a country, what will be your thought insofar as really trying to contain and saving Eskom labor force? Privatization, it's something the President has spoken about, and we are following that. We don't want to privatize. But the reality of the situation is that the companies that are going to be on there, that are going to benefit, in fact, that are still, in fact, running Eskom. Eskom has been run for many decades, 40 decades. It's been around in this country. And those companies, or other people say it's what capital, I don't want to say those things. They've been around. They're entrenched in the system. And we are just being people finding ourselves with these things of tenders and BEs. But the reality is that Eskom was never owned by this situation that we're trying to redress and transform society. The old infrastructure regime has been at the fore. It's not a secret. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. Exhausted your hour, and now I will give another bite to all the presenters. By this time it won't be your 20 minutes, please. I know for a fact that Cosatu and the professor, including the energy intensive users group, they are more, because they've made presentation, they can perhaps have a lot of issues to clarify and to put into perspective. Appeal to all of you to respond in a manner that is not at least cover the same time you have been allocated previously. I won't give you specific time, but I just appeal to also understand that there are other people to respond, and they might need their second bites this other side. Thank you. Let me start. Let me start from behind now, and end with Cosatu. Let me start with you, Outa.
Thank you. I also just want to apologize. I don't think I introduced my name, Liz McDade, so I just to apologize to the members. I'm not going to take up much time. I think I really valued the questions and would look forward to further engagement. I just want to clarify one thing, which was the just transition, which maybe wasn't highlighted sufficiently. And for outer, we think that the way that Eskom needs to be unbundled or whatever must be in a way that we strengthen the energy supply system in the country. And one of the highlights that's come from municipalities is the lack of skills. Many small municipalities don't have electrical engineers or technical people. So this is a thought in a sense of we haven't been able to do hard investigations, but it would seem that maybe there are technical workers in the Eskom field that could be then deployed at the local level, which would strengthen the local municipality electricity supply system and relieve Eskom maybe of its, if it's found to be bloated. But maybe we would also say that, you know, Eskom has done an amazing job in reaching many, many communities who never had electricity. So that, maybe coming back to the wires, the transmission and the distribution systems are critical areas that we would like to see strengthened through investment and skills, because we think that's the critical factor. I'm not really, I think there's nothing much from my side that was specific, so I would rather give space to other presenters to clarify in the interest of time. Thank you.
Solidarity?
Chairperson. Yeah. No, thanks, Chairperson, and I do really appreciate. But as per my submission, Chair, being an observer, I cannot meaningfully engage in the comments, but I will duly convey the messages, and we will come prepared next time. Hopefully, invitation will be in time. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I think now is the energy intensive. Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, no particular comments at this time. I think our position was relatively open and clear, but I think the issue is extremely complex, and I'll be circulating some, or to members that asked, I'll be circulating some copies of the presentation, and probably I'll see if we can actually attach some notes as well that may clarify some of the points that were raised. I think at this stage, no specific comment. What I'd like to do is take back some of the questions and the scope of questions. I think particularly to other members that presented, and discuss this within the group and revert collectively as a digested response. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor?
Chair, the first question directed to me was around cost cutting. I mean, in a situation where...
Sorry, Professor. Necessarily at this level, you don't have to only respond to your question. I was supposed to have said that to everybody. You don't necessarily have to respond to questions that are directed to you. You can engage and raise views. I mean, yeah, just people must be open to say whatever.
Thank you, Chair. So clearly, in the context where Eskom is insolvent and in a debt trap, it has to be a multi-pronged approach. We have to deal with the debt relief and refinancing issue, but we also have to deal with the income statement, which is on the revenue on the one side and costs on the other. And the Honourable Member, I think, quite correctly said it's not just an issue of coal. Coal is the biggest area. The second biggest area of costs for Eskom is the payroll. And we saw how the numbers went up from 32,000 employees in 2007 to 46,000. So clearly something has to be examined there. I personally would advise that Eskom start at management level. You've already seen that at the very top management level, executive level, which is the F band, they more or less halved the positions there. I think the E band, it's common, I think, consensus that the E band managers are overstaffed. Those numbers grew hugely in the last few years. Not always clear what all those line responsibilities are. And then, I mean, given the sensitivity of high levels of employment, I think there is some room that over time one could manage a right sizing of Eskom. I mean, just over this last year, for example, from financial year 18 to financial year 19, the employment numbers in Eskom reduced by 2,000, right? So it went from 48,000 to 46,000. So there is a process of natural attrition, early retirements, etc., which over a 5-7 year period could get one to where one would think more efficient numbers. A question around, will the sovereign downgrade affect Eskom? And will Eskom be in junk? Eskom is 7 notches into junk already. And this has also been an extraordinary fall, because over 10 years, Eskom has gone from investment grade into junk. It used to be 3 grades into investment rating. In fact, at one stage, it had a higher credit rating than the sovereign, but it has dropped 10 notches over 10 years. And it's no question, if the sovereign is downgraded, Eskom will have a further downgraded notch. And what's the effect of that? It makes its debt much more expensive. You know, when Eskom went out on international bond offer recently, its dollar bonds, if swapped back into rands, are costing Eskom more than 16% in interest, 1/6. So it's a huge cost. So it's a big issue. And that's why we think the restructuring is important, because parts of the business, for example, transmission, as I said, if it's a standalone entity, would quite quickly go back to investment grade, be able to access capital markets at much cheaper rates. And there were a number of questions around the view on Cosatu's proposal. And I think it was very valuable today to see the scope of their proposal. So it's a very comprehensive set of suggestions, all aimed at creating a social compact around Eskom, and that, as I've said, is to be hugely welcomed. The controversial bits are the bits around how Eskom debt relief and refinancing will happen. As I said in my proposal, their suggestion that a special purpose vehicle as the mechanism for doing this, linked to improved performance in Eskom, is very good. To simply taking Eskom's debt off onto the sovereign. Taking Eskom's debt onto the sovereign is simple, everyone understands it. But it creates moral hazard, right? Because you don't change behavior in Eskom. And then Eskom could be coming back again for another debt relief later. The attractiveness of this SPV is you're creating a separate financing vehicle, but you are refinancing Eskom based on improved performance. It could be progress in restructuring, it could be around another KPIs. The controversial bit is what sources of funding are used for the refinancing. So clearly there needs to be a much bigger discussion around the use of government employee pension fund via the PIC, and whether that refinancing is equity or debt. There's a very high risk that any equity investments in Eskom disappears. And because there is a 250 billion rand hole in Eskom's accounts, so it's very hard to see how you would get an equity return on Eskom in its current position unless one takes a very long view. And as has already been mentioned, the PIC has very high exposure to Eskom already, more than 100 billion. And the DBSA also has a very high exposure. I think some 25% of their loan book is Eskom at the moment. So I think there are limits there. And that's why the President's task team has put forward this additional proposal. So we're not saying, don't look for more PIC money or DFI money. Absolutely, we need to look at all sources. But we think that there's a new source that could be used very effectively, and that is a blended climate-linked finance facility at concessionary rates. Then let me just end by addressing these two issues which are always very controversial. The issue of unbundling. So let's say very, very, very clearly, unbundling does not equal privatization. And the best way to give an example of that is China has fully unbundled their electricity system, right? So they have an independent transmission system, grid company, and they have a number of generators and a number of distributors. But they're all state-owned. All of them are state-owned. But they're unbundled because there's a logic to it and it brings efficiencies. And so I would plead that if we take positions on unbundling, firstly, that it's not equated with privatization, because we can give many examples where it's not. And then let's have the debate around, or discussion around, what are the disadvantages or advantages? Because I think that debate has not really happened enough. And then finally on IPPs, so we all agree that the old IPPs are a problem. They were expensive. But let's remember that all of the IPPs at the moment comprise less than 5% of Eskom's sales, less than 5%. So actually they don't impact Eskom's finances negatively. There are only two ways in which they could do that. The one is if the IPPs are taking sales away from Eskom. But Eskom doesn't have enough electricity, right? At the moment it won't for the next five or more years. So IPPs are not taking money away. And the second way that IPPs could affect Eskom finances, if there's not full cost recovery. But there is, because when NERSA calculates the tariff, there are two buckets of revenue. One is Eskom's costs and the revenue to cover those costs. And the second bucket is what does Eskom pay to IPPs? Now, every time NERSA has done a tariff determination, it has given Eskom the full amount that it has to give to pay IPPs. So there's full cost recovery there. How does it work on the tariff? Well, it's only 5% of the sales. So what happens is that that extra amount that has to go for the expensive IPPs is spread across 95% of consumers. So consumers are subsidizing a small amount the extra cost for IPPs. And then the last thing to say with IPPs is new IPPs will be the cheapest source of electricity. So the old IPPs are a problem, no question. But prices have changed extraordinarily. And let me give you that figure again. If we run REAP 5, Renewable Energy IPP bid round window 5, we will get prices below 40 South African cents. Eskom's average cost of production is currently 106. So new IPPs will actually save Eskom money. And this is the complication about the IPP debate. The old problems, and I think we have to deal with some of those expensive costs, but new investments are going to be a very different story. Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks, Comrade Chair. I think I had a fair amount of questions. So I've got about 17 pages of questions. No, I think, Comrade Chair, we're very excited that by this whole debate we're having as a country. Eskom is not about any of us in particular. It's irrespective of your political party, whether you're management or worker, it's about us saving the nation. So we're quite pleased and we've been willing to accept the punches we've received in the media, even from the DA, some other trade unions, commentators that how dare Cosatu make proposals. Well, we have to have this debate, Comrade Chair. We're not being alarmist to say Eskom is in a death crisis. So Honorable Murray is right, it's insolvent. And you can manage the collapse of SA. It'll be a painful blow. But Eskom collapses, we can close shop as a country, without exaggerating, you know? We can't emphasize the amount of damage we've done. You know, when Inhlanhla was fired, we lost 500 billion rand from the stock market. That was workers' pension money. If Eskom goes under, it will go under this rate. We'll be losing trillions of rands worth of pension money. So that's what informed our intervention. And we're willing to accept the punches for it, Comrade Chair. You know, at times you must do painful things. I think we agree with Honourable Moreira on the diagnosis. No one can disagree. We agree that debt level is unsustainable, and part of reducing Eskom's cost for generation is about it investing in renewable energy. That's why we've been hammering the ministers responsible to expand Eskom's mandate, to allow it to get fully involved in renewable energy. Let it own it, not just the Darling wind farm, because you know it's going to save Eskom. You have to deal with the costs. Even around the wage bill, it's not an easy thing for labour federations to say, come and let's discuss the wage bill. It's not a job of a union to say, let's discuss, you know, wages. But we realize Eskom is going to collapse, and if we didn't intervene, Eskom will retrench workers. Tito Mbani was talking about 17,000 Eskom workers must be retrenched. The former chair, Jabo Mabuza, talked about 12,000. We'd rather have a discussion now to see how do we save those jobs than to allow it to crash like SA is crashing, and then we can't save those jobs, you know. And our members, Comrade Chair, have been facing the brunt of retrenchments in the state sector. SABC has been retrenching workers, CSIR retrenched workers. You've got about 27 municipalities which no longer pay workers on time. So we're witnessing the collapse of the state. That's why we said, let's intervene now before it's too late. And we said, as Cosatu, we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. We're not just going to come with slogans and demands. So on the wage bill, Comrade Chair, we've said, let there be an audit, a skilled audit, a head count, so you know exactly what's what. The head count has reduced to about 44,000 now from a peak of 47,000. But look, you can't justify a management structure which has jumped from 80 to 800. And they earn above 2 million rand. Those are not workers. And those are the guys who have broken Eskom. And they must pay the price, because now we're having to intervene to save Eskom. We agree with the new CEO director as well, saying let's redeploy those management back to the power stations. They should never have gone to head office. But equally, we're pleased that he's now doing the lifestyle audit. Those guys who have looted at Eskom, whoever they are, supply chain management, they must face the consequence of law. You can't expect public servants to contribute to saving if the guilty parties have eaten and there's no consequence. It can't be, Chair, that you have management across the parastatals who earn exorbitant salaries. The CEO of Mgeni Water Board earns about 11 million rand a year. Yet we're now focusing on the public service wage bill, which is essentially nurses and teachers who earn 200,000 rand. So if government wants to ask workers to tighten the belt, they must lead by example. They must deal with the bloated management structures, the wasteful expenditure, the corruption, etc. To Honourable Mkwanazi, some of these things are going to take time to flesh out. You need a lot of technical working around the municipal funding model. We agree. Many municipalities depend upon electricity tariffs. But Eskom cannot subsidize local government. Eskom is dying as we speak. We need to have the discussion. It won't be an overnight discussion. We've been raising for years as Cosatu to all these parliaments. We need to review the local government structure. It's not affordable to have 257 municipalities. So we're quite pleased that ANC now is coming with a new district model. We think that's where the emphasis should be, around capacitating district municipalities, saving on costs. It's not affordable for Laingsburg to have a municipality, for Prince Albert to have a municipality. There is no rates base to sustain it. You can't be having 257 mayors. And the quality that, for example, you attract a management, like in Beaufort West, where you pay a manager 250,000 rand, you're not going to get a skilled manager to come and run it. So we need to have that conversation. It won't be an overnight. And equally, Chair, you can't have municipalities, because they're bankrupt, sitting on consumers' electricity payments, like in the Harry Smith example, where industry, consumers were paying, municipalities sitting on it. So it has to be, we have to delink the two. It will take time. Also, Honourable Mkwanazi, about the tariffs. Look, Professor Ibaut will know better than all of us, but the tariffs have gone up by about 400% in the past decade. And that's to recover the debt payment, the corruption, etc., the wasteful expenditure. If you're allowed to continue that road, Eskom will die. If you're allowed to continue that road, the mining industry will die. And that's what's forcing the mining industry now to go off-grid. And you can't blame them, because mining jobs are also critical. And you can't, so that's part of the financial intervention. You have to release the financial pressure on Eskom, because a lot of that is about paying the debt. If you can release the debt pressure, the tariffs can become more affordable, and they have to be affordable to support consumers, mining and manufacturing, And again, for us to start exporting again to neighboring states, we've lost those customers because we are simply too expensive. But again, Kwanazi, we agree with you. You have to address the production costs, the generation costs. That's why we've said Eskom must get involved in renewable energy as a cheap form of electricity. The bloated management structure must be dealt with. The corruption, the wasteful expenditure must be dealt with. And again, suppliers, that 400% jump in coal supplies pricing to Eskom has to be market-related, has to be slashed. The window 1 IPP generations must be affordable. There's no point in holding on for the IPP guys to hold on to the contracts and say, well, we have a contract, it's legally binding. Eskom won't be there in a year's time. So they have to take a haircut. We all have to take a haircut to save a national asset. And again, Comrade Chair, those guys in Eskom who are part of the looting through overpricing, because there is that javelin approach, they have to face the law. Comrade Chair, around I think it's also Honorable Mkwanazi, if I'm right, around the issue of pensioners. So maybe it's important, many people don't understand, even our own members also don't always understand in the motions of the day, that the government employee pension fund is a defined benefit. So it's determined, what you receive is based upon your years of service, the amount that you contributed. It's the same thing with the unemployment insurance fund and the compensation of injury on duty fund, which are also part of the PIC investment pool. So the PIC has been making huge profits. For the last 15 years, they've been making profits every year. They were at 400 billion rand, they're 2.1 trillion rand. We're not saying go to the teacher's pension fund, take money out of our pocket. We're not saying that. We're saying the excess interest that is available in the PIC can it not be utilized to save the most essential national good. If Eskom collapses, there will be no stock market. And you know, members, it's important to remember that PIC is invested in 1,200 companies. 90% of the PIC investments is on the stock market. If Eskom collapses, there will be no stock market. Those shares will be worthless. They'll be meaningless. And look, you know, Chair, if I could ask any member here to name 5 companies where the PIC is invested in, I suspect all of us will struggle. We've never had a discussion on any of those 1,200 companies. Are they benefiting workers, or is it going to benefit the stock market or owners of companies? For the first time, I say, let's have that discussion as workers. It's a bit ironic, people say, how dare you discuss this thing? Workers are never consulted about Steinhoff. We didn't consult it. We're now saying, let's have this thing, let's have this money benefit. And not in a reckless way, Chair. So if the PIC has already got 105 billion rand, of which about 15 billion rand has already been paid back, which is 90 billion rand in Eskom through government bonds. Let's say we say another 100 billion rand. That's about 4% of the PIC's assets. I've never heard of 4% threatening the other 96%. It's sustainable. But Chair, what we can guarantee is that if we don't save Eskom, it is guaranteed that the PIC investments in the stock market will collapse. Chair, it's not the first time we've done this kind of intervention. So a year ago, we had a huge discussion around EdCon. It's ironic, the name is almost the same as Eskom. EdCon was also dying, Comrade Chair. And there was 40,000 direct and 100,000 indirect jobs at stake. And we formed the social compact as Cosatu, with Fidusa, with the private sector, in terms of the banks and the shopping centers, with government. And together we invested 3 billion rand to save EdCon. We know we're not going to get the money back immediately. Probably get it back in about 3 years' time. But it was to get EdCon back on its feet, have a clear plan, a turnaround plan for national good. It's ironic we were never criticized by any opposition party that time for that. But we understand we have different political beliefs. We as Cosatu are socialists who believe in the state intervention in the economy. We appreciate the DA was to privatize or Eskom, etc. So that's fine. It's an ideological difference. Chair, look, we don't take this thing investing in Eskom lightly. I mean, our members, it is a genuine concern. And when there was looting at Eskom, sorry, not Eskom, at the PIC, at an industrial scale level, we intervened as Cosatu. We worked very closely with the Fifth Parliament, with the ANC MPs and other MPs, even from the DA, about a PIC amendment bill to address the corruption in the PIC. That's why you now have, for the first time in 108 years, 3 worker representatives sitting on the PIC board. That is because of that intervention. And we got huge flack from a lot of quarters. But Chair, you have to do that kind of a thing. So we look at government bonds, which are guaranteed, where you have return assets. It's more affordable for Eskom because you can have more generous payment terms, interest levels, etc. You give breathing space as opposed to the banks lending. But Honorable Waters is right, Chair. There is a risk. But again, if you don't intervene, you're not facing a risk. You're facing a guarantee of the pension investments being lost and our jobs being lost. We're looking at the PIC having a representation on the Eskom board because we want to maximize the stick to force Eskom to restructure. We can't depend upon friendship or promises. We've been down that route. We would agree with Honourable Waters 200%. The lifestyle audits, the forensic audits must go across the state, including to cabinet, existing and previous, including to provincial MSC, to opposition members of parliament who have been linked to the PIC investments, to Steinhoff, to VBS. We must all face the might of the law. No one must be above it. We know corruption doesn't have a color. Even us as Chileans, that demon is everywhere. We have to uproot it. Chair, look, around the balloting members, look, we appreciate the politicians, populism is always an attractive thing. It's nice to say, let's have a ballot. Do we invest in Eskom? We can do that. We can also do a ballot on Steinhoff. We can have ballots on everything. As far as we're concerned, we had in elections last year, there was a clear mandate. Saving the SOEs was a clear ANC mandate we gave. Investing in SOEs, including through prescribed assets, is a clear mandate. PIC has been invested in Eskom for many years. So we're not sure what is the fundamental issue. But we must also be careful, Chair, to be too populist. Because next thing we'll say, let's have a referendum on the death penalty. We know people would vote for it, but it might not be a right thing to do, That's why the ANC and other parties always took a position. Let's be very careful how we weigh these things. You can have a referendum on taxes. 99% of South Africa will say cancel all taxes. We'll have no state as a consequence, But, Chair, we agree with Honourable Waters. We'll be careful with what we do. And we're willing to put on Cosatu investments there as well. Everybody must contribute, public and private. We must share the burden. We must share the risk to first save this national asset. That is part of the Eskom Framework Agreement. It actually says we must mobilize public and private financial support. It doesn't get to the nitty-gritties of, is it from this fund or from that fund? That'll take technical work. To Honourable Buthelezi, so our sacrifice as well, workers are already sacrificing through a 40% unemployment rate and retrenchments. Eskom workers are under huge pressure because the retrenchment guillotine is hanging, hence our intervention. But just saying, look, we can't just offer slogans as Cosatu. Hence we've said we'll support a PIC investment. We'll have that discussion on the headcount at Eskom and redeployments, etc. And we're willing to invest pensions funds there. And I think, look, I don't have all the details around the Eskom arrest, but there was 2 rounds of Eskom arrests. I think November last year, for about 700 million rand. But it's not enough. Much more must be done, especially when they have reports of 2,000 officials at Eskom having contracts with Eskom, which can't be right. Our position to the whole debate about bundling, divisions, is that, look, Eskom must remain a public utility. Workers cannot be thrown under the bus. Eskom does have existing divisions, and our NUM, our Mine Workers Union, which sits at Eskom, had a very good discussion with the new CEO. He's focusing on the redivisioning, which is fine because Eskom has different divisions. As long as it remains a public utility, workers are not retrenched. We have a clear term plan. That's what we would want to see. But look, even if you were to the right of Margaret Thatcher and you said privatize Eskom, I don't think there's anybody who will buy a company with 454 billion rand worth of debt. That won't happen. You can even say open up the IPP window completely, but IPPs only generate about 5% of our current generation capacity. It'll take them a decade to reach Eskom's capacity. So we have to deal with the reality. Eskom is the company which exists. All we're saying is IPPs, and we made compromises there, is that let the IPPs stand on their own 2 feet. The tariffs they charge Eskom must be affordable, cannot bleed Eskom. We might have to check all of Eskom's expenditure. I'm going to try to be a bit quick, Comrade Chair, not to abuse members too much. So look, Comrade Chair, to Honourable Piri, we really had focused on solutions. We could have spent the whole day discussing our complaints. And complaining is very therapeutic. It might make us feel better, but it won't keep the lights on. Without being arrogant, it's really only Cosatu which has put his neck on the block to say, here are solutions, here's what we can contribute. We welcome anybody else who has contributions, and they can enrich each other. We've had very fantastic responses from the private sector, from the pension funds, from lenders saying, we think this is how we can enrich a discussion. And we think it's actually quite amazing how even Busa is saying they actually are in agreement with us on the principles. We'll flesh out the modalities. That'll take some time, that's fine. And we agree with what business is saying, that when we invest in Eskom, the fiduciary duties, the financial integrity of the market, the mandates of the investment funds and the pension funds must be respected. There's no compromising there, we agreed. But we were saying, let's see how we contribute. Look, around the board representation, look, it's part of rebuilding trust. You're saying workers must invest to save. They must have a seat on the table. It's part of building confidence, transparency. It's based upon the German model where you had normally 50-50. And that is also what we fought for on the PIC board. And even the PIC board, Comrade Chair, we didn't just fight for two Cosatu comrades to sit there with red T-shirts. We specifically fought for, in the PIC bill, that the minority federation of the Public Service Bargaining Council, which is FEDUSA, must have a seat by law. As part of oversight, transparency, let's all be part of it. Also so we can police each other, because you know corruption, it's easy to bribe somebody when you're dealing with billions or trillions. To Honorable Maute, look, it's not a bailout, it's an investment, and we've got about 35 conditions which grow all the time as we have these debates to Eskom. We can't hand out a blank check. It's too significant a cost. And we've specifically looked around how to reduce the generation cost, which is the corruption issue, the wasteful expenditure, the bloated management, the redeployment of staff, the overpricing. We agree with you on the core supplies, the evergreen contracts. It's also about Eskom being part of the renewable energy sector, and so on. So we agree, you have to address the fundamental structural issues. And that's why we're looking at short, medium, and long-term interventions. Comment to Honorable Maute, look, the principle that if you don't pay, you won't get electricity has to be applied. It can't be that 60% of us have prepaid, 40% of us can choose when we feel like to pay. It's not sustainable, especially when this extent of a crisis. But we agree, the issue of the indigent policy has to be enforced. You have many municipalities which have long ago quietly abandoned it. Others at different levels. That has to be enforced, including Soweto. And you have to increase the free allocation to indigent households within a sustainable way as per the manifesto. But, Comrade Chair, we can't put Soweto on kid gloves. It can't be that Khayelitsha and Bondival can pay, that Taung can pay, that Limpopo can pay. Poverty is across the country. If you qualify, you're a social grant recipient, you qualify for indigent households, go and register and you receive that free thing. But we can't expect nurses to invest in Eskom, for the Eastern Cape, for Transkei to pay. And we somehow, because Soweto and Gauteng is always a tight political contest, we are scared now to speak the truth. We must bite the bullet, Comrade Chair. It doesn't matter what color your T-shirt is. I think I'm just getting to the end, Comrade Chair. Look, we're having a very good discussion at NEDLAC's PwC, the Presidential Working Committee. We think we will resolve our social compact engagements quite soon in the next few weeks. We've really tried to go the extra mile around inclusion. So when FEDUSA and the Public Service Association had concerns, we were meeting with them, we're still meeting with them, to find the right wording, because we want everybody to be involved. We don't want to bulldoze things. And in fact, also we're meeting with Solidarity's leadership on Friday as well as Cosatu to see how more can we find each other. We don't think we can have really fundamental differences from each other. Yeah, I think, Commissioner, look, Solidarity said they want to go to the High Court, and look, that's their constitutional right. No one can deny them that right. I would suspect they would struggle on that basis. And look, the PIC doesn't take an instruction for us as Cosatu. They have their own mandating process. The fiduciary duty, does it make sense? What's the return on investment? The financial integrity, so on, and they must continue to do that. They did it with EdCon. We said, here's a mandate to save EdCon. They went through all the process, and they were very strict. We didn't say, don't compromise. They can't compromise, they must do it. They've done it through the PIC, through government bonds, and Eskom has been paying without fail each time. So it was a useful investment. And look, also, Chair, according to the Pension Act, the Regulation 28, you're allowed as investments to invest up to 10% in what they call alternate investments, which is essential public economic goods. So not looking just at Eskom, but also on the railways, the ports, NSFAS funding, etc. We need to have a broader discussion to see how we grow the economy. Because the state on its own can't fund everything. If you have a roads backlog of about 600 billion rand, you'd have to massively increase the budget and taxes, which would kill the economy. So we need to have a broader, progressive, sustainable discussion approach. I think the last question is about corruption. Look, all of us must tackle corruption. We must rebuild the NPA, the police. It's about maximizing transparency and so on, Chair. That's why we had fought for the PIC board. I think that's basically it, Comrade Chair. Sorry to take so long. Thank you.
Honorable members, we are left with very few minutes. I will just give you 1 minute per person. I don't want to say one question because you might be ill, and you can do that in just 1 minute. Thank you, Honorable Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Here I go to the Prof. I was shocked when you said Eskom's -7 junk status. Can you explain to us how low an entity can actually go as far as junk status? Is it indefinite or is it... and I take it also from your... the question I put to you is that there's nothing prohibiting a pension fund from investing in a -7 junk status entity, that they can do it. And then to Cosatu, just thank you for your replies. Just on the PRC, you said you want to use the excess money. So I take it over time, and I'm not here to defend the PRC or anything. They've invested quite wisely generally, right, over time. That's why they have this excess money you talked about. And I would hope that when they invested in Steinhoff, it was a growing concern and wasn't a junk status organization. Here you're asking people to gamble their pensions in a -7 junk status entity with state guarantee, which is actually not a guarantee at all, quite frankly. I mean, that's what you're asking people to do. And that's why we're insisting that there's a ballot put to the members, current and retired members of the PRC, to see if they want to actually gamble with their pensions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you exceeded a bit. Is there any other honor mode?
No, thank you, Chair. The issue of unbundling, and I want to warn the ANC comrade. When you see something being proposed by these ones, you must know there's a problem. Don't just rush to sing for supper that you don't know where it comes from. The issue of unbundling, when I chair, is not going to assist the situation at the Eskom right now. Because what it means is that you're going to have a distribution leg, you're going to have a power generation leg. Now you need two different structures. The structure that will be running the generation and the structure that is running the distribution. Now, on top of the already bloated structure, you are increasing. It has not worked at Transnet. Transnet, we've got an engineering division of Transnet, which is basically looking at manufacturing the rolling stock and maintaining the rolling stock for TFR, Transnet Freight Rail. Now, it can never stand on its own unless if they have to go into the rest of the continent to look for business, because on their own, being an engineering division, they cannot financially stand on their own. They're always being supported by other divisions of Transnet. We'll engage more on this one, Chair, but I'm just warning that the current situation at Eskom right now, unbundling is not going to be the solution.
Okay. Honorable Gumeda.
Mine is, I wanted to ask Cosatu.
Can I get the indication of the hand? Because I don't want you to to respond to each other. We've got people there who we will sit and engage together. But we've got these visitors, yes. We are shooting that side. Okay.
No, Chair, I'm just asking Cosatu that if they were to put that plan into implementation, how long will it take them to? That's one. And as well, if perhaps I refer to Chair when you say that these things we rather discuss among ourselves as politicians, not be said perhaps in a public platform where as if we don't know what unbundling means. So I'm putting a challenge that let's discuss these things when we're together as politicians.
Honorable Shabalala.
Thanks, Chair. On Cosatu, do we have, on the turnaround plan, have you engaged, because we can hear you're engaging with lots of stakeholders and lobbying and all of that, perhaps for this plan that you have you engaged the department or the executive? As you say, the plan must include and it's instructive. Has there been that engagement? The retrenchment, early retirements, do we know of how many early retirements perhaps that we might have that are over pension and are still in the system? Thanks.
Thank you. Any last one? Thank you so much. Enemies, not in a literal way. Okay. Prof? Yeah.
So, Chair, let me just go quickly. Eskom credit rating can still fall. It's not unlimited. So the Moody's, S&P, and Fitch have credit rating tables. I mean, when you get to the bottom there, your paper's worthless and no one's going to lend. The effect as you go down, obviously, is twofold. One is your cost of debt, your cost of capital increases, and it also becomes more difficult to access capital. And that's where Eskom is now. It's very, very difficult for Eskom to access new capital markets, currently where it is. And it's going to become more difficult if it falls a further notch.
Honorable Mr. Pat?
No, thanks, Comrade Chair.
Not use these titles.
No, I know which title you are used to.
Honorable here.
No, even before you came here, you were honorable as a teacher as well. Yeah, no, to Honorable Chabalala, look, we've been having engagements with we met with the Alliance Political Council beginning of November last year. In December, we've been engaging with the President, with the different relevant ministers. We've met with Minister of Public Enterprise, Energy, Finance, Trade and Industry, Labour, etc. We've been engaging with businesses and so on. But we accept this is not going to happen overnight. You're not dealing with just printing a pamphlet. A lot of these things will take actually months, if not 6 months, a year, to flesh out all the details. And also for us, it's even about rebuilding the trust, because we don't trust anything Eskom management tells us. These are the guys who buy water bottles for 54 Rand, black plastic bags for 24 Rand. We met with the Eskom management last year, and they're like, hey, I wouldn't trust those guys to tie my shoelace, you know? Excluding the CEO, who I think is giving positive hope, you know? So it's about everything. We'd rather have an honest conversation once off and not have the same conversation a year down the road. We can take the punches now for how dare we save Eskom, but we can't have this every Christmas. I think, and I'm not sure if I heard Honorable Gumede correctly, but I think he said about the time frame of implementation. So look, we're looking at kind of basically 4 things. Some stuff is urgent, must happen tomorrow, and we're glad that the new CEO is already starting on it. Some stuff is more short, others medium, others longer term. And that's why we've also included even moving beyond to future energy opportunities like electric vehicles, building solar panels, because you can see how the economy is changing structures. And if you sleep on the job, as we've done frequently, you'll be left with a train wreck. You know, for example, we never fixed the post office all these years, hanging by life. SA, for years, we kicked the can down the road. It's on life support now. So that's why we're saying let's have a multiple complex intervention plan. And it needs to look at stuff, you know, Chair, that the opportunities in energy are so fantastic. You can become an income earner for the country, like agriculture or like tourism. We can be exporting electricity once again to neighboring states. We can be exporting solar panels. So it's about us being creative, Comrade Chair, seizing the opportunities and contributing, all of us. To Honorable Waters, look, it's not an easy thing. Even amongst our own members, this is a tough issue. When a previous finance minister, let me not say who, a previous finance minister came a few years ago to a Cosatu CEC and said, take the PIC to invest in the SOEs. We chased him out the window. But that was the era of industrial, officially sanctioned state capture. Of course, also at that time, Eskom was not collapsing as it is today. We think we do have, without engaging in personality cults, we do have a leadership in the president, many ministers who are committed to cleaning up the state, but equally, you don't have the luxury of time of not intervening. Not that we're going to be dependent upon trust. So that's why we say maximize the transparency, deal with the forensic audit, implement the forensic audit recommendations, etc. And that's why those who have stolen, and we've been asking the President, exact words that Honorable Waters raised, we would love to see a few politicians going to polls more prison. Those confidence again, of all parties. As long as they're guilty. Anybody who's guilty. Look, Chair, and you would notice that we've not said take the PIC to every SOE. We're focusing on Eskom. We have not said take the PIC to SAA. We've said let's focus on Eskom. There's a clear business case for Eskom. We need to have a clear turnaround plan. And look, it's not an easy thing. Any investment is a risk, a 50-50 risk. But not saving Eskom is a 100% guarantee of an economic Armageddon. And the pensioners will be the first with workers to suffer. We do have confidence in state guarantee bonds. And look, again, sure, the state can collapse. Then there's nothing on the table, no matter where you invest it. Chair, look, we don't have a problem with balloting in principle. We have ballots before we go on strike. It's part of the law. We ballot all the time. I'm not sure practically if you're going to ballot every single investment by the PIC, 1,200. We'll be balloting every single day, 24/7. The point is, Chair, the PIC has clear mandates by law. They must do the fiduciary duties, the financial integrities. Does it meet the investment criteria? They get a mandate from the GPF or the UAF or the COIDA boards. They must abide by those. There's no compromising. If they have additional criteria for Eskom to clean up, we will support it 200%. So there's no compromising upon that, you know. And Chair, let me also say lastly that it is a difficult issue, and you know, we were not so impressed by the DA's video that they sent to members, kind of scaremongering, that Cosatu is taking your pension money, it's going to be chowed, etc. So we understand politics as part of the political game, no problem. But it's a very sensitive issue. Members are traumatized by the extent of corruption. And it's not just been in the public sector where there's been corruption. Steinhoff, Fidentia, that was private sector corruption. Private sector is part of the Eskom looting. But we have been engaging with our members, with our unions, with our shop steward councils at large to say, let's have this discussion, but we must have it. And the debate, I think, Chair, we'll find each other. We'll box each other. The fact that Busa is saying that Cosatu may not be completely mad, they actually agree with us, shows you how we can find each other. We're hopeful that even amongst parties we'll find each other. We've done it before in Parliament. Around the PIC bill, I think it was only the DA at the end which didn't support the PIC bill. We can find each other, but these are our national interests. We have to make compromises far beyond our political colours, Comrade Chair. But we're very optimistic we can do it, Comrade Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, honourable members. Thank you so much to our invitees who participated in this engagement. We would like to really express our appreciation for you to bless this portfolio committee with such a rich information. We would like to also to be more inclusive as this public enterprise portfolio committee, inclusive in terms of engaging all stakeholders and listen to them without prejudice, without attitude, meaning negative attitude, but with a positive attitude in order to hear, because when you listen to a person with negativity, it's difficult even to appreciate the correct or the agreement with that particular person. Therefore, we really, as a portfolio committee, appreciate to get these diverse views. We want to understand, actually, the problems in this entity, in all the entities, particularly in this one, and also your thinking as a stakeholder, you know, your views in terms of how do we get out of the quagmire we find ourselves in. That's why we would like once again to thank you very much for your efforts. We cannot, of course, avoid the reality that Cosatu, among all the people who have presented here, presented a very comprehensive, very open, debatable kind of an input, and almost all the honourable members here could not avoid to go to that input presented by Cosatu. And I still believe that we still have to read it, that input, not only, of course, the presentation, but the piece of document that captures the essence of their presentation. I think it's important for us to reread it, because some of our questions I could see that they are covered there. And perhaps when we read outside this, we will appreciate those kind of information. Thank you, Professor. And we think that you still have to also sort of avail yourself when we will continue needing your services as this portfolio committee. Thank you so much. Thank you. By the way, Busa indicated that your importance here as the energy intensive users group is even more important than them. in the sense that you are part of the business and you are directly involved here. Therefore, thank you so much also for your participation. And I cannot end by not again apologize to Solidarity. We hope that we will appreciate, even if when you're done with your presentation, you can send it to the Secretary of the Portfolio Committee. It can also inform our continuous engagement, because we don't want to talk in silos here. We'd like to hear even your thinking. We are not only satisfied by your presence here, but we want your presence to have a quality contribution. Want it to impact on our understanding, so that we're as part of oversight. When you oversight, we are not only oversighting machines there. We also want to know all the people that are involved in that particular entity. Therefore, it's important to know how Solidarity think in relation to the issues there. With that note, honorable members, I think we reached